like to call to order the January 9th, 2013 meeting of the Milton School Committee. And as is our custom, I invite you to rise as you're able and salute the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So our first order of business is this evening's agenda. Just a couple of minor changes under the superintendent's report. Number 5, item C, the Milton High School Program of Studies, we're going to put off to our next meeting. So that will come off. After the policy subcommittee number 7, we're going to have a brief facilities subcommittee report between number 7 and number 8 on the item, on the agenda. And on number 8, we're taking off the item A, the cut reduction list for tonight, and we're going to add item C, the off-site solar contract. That is a very late addition, like 3 minutes ago. And also under the executive session number 12, we're going to add an item C, deployment of security personnel. So there will be a third item under the executive session, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Anything else on this evening's agenda, folks?
Mr. Chair, not on this evening's agenda, but just highlighting our next meeting, I'd like to again add deployment of security devices and personnel under the executive session for that meeting, and ask that we invite the Chief Wells and Sergeant Jack Richmond to do a briefing for us.
This is on the 23rd?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for tonight's agenda?
One more thing.
Yes, go right ahead.
Since this is the first meeting that we've had since the terrible tragedy in Newtown, I'd like to ask that we have a brief moment of silence for the victims in that tragedy.
I think that's a fine idea. So we'll observe a moment of silence.
Thank you.
And if we'd continue just for another moment for a member of Steve Wilkie, who is a great supporter of the Milton Public Schools, who also recently passed away.
Father of Steve Wilkie.
Father of Steve Wilkie. Sorry. Can't read this. Right. Thank you. So now we will move to citizen speak. Do we have anyone for citizen speak this evening? We don't. So we'll move on to approval of minutes. November 28th. I'd accept a motion to approve the minutes of November 28th.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Mr. Walker. Any corrections, comments, amendments? Seeing none. All those in favor then? Opposed, 1 abstention. Ms. Kelly is abstaining, so that's 4-0-1. The minutes of December 5th.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Walker, seconded by Ms. Sheridan. Any, again, corrections, comments on those? Yes.
On the last page, the top where it says, we're talking about the policies. Under discussion, the final sentence says, by unanimous consent, the committee tabled policy CBI and returned to policy JGA. Those two should be switched. So it should be that by unanimous consent, the committee tabled policy JGA and returned to policy CBI.
Good enough. Anything else on the minutes of December 5th? Hearing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous. Minutes of December 12th, you got a second version of it after the initial packet. Just a couple minor typographicals. For instance, NEC is spelled N-E-C-C now instead of N-E-C in that report. It was just a couple of typographical things like that. It came a couple days after the first packet.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Sheridan, second by Mr. Walker. Any further changes on December 12th? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. And we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chairman Pavlicek. First, it's my pleasure. I'd like to invite to join the school committee at the table our new director of the Milton Public Library, Will Adamczyk. And with him tonight is Milton Public Library trustee Frank Schroth. Would the two of you join us at the table?
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to see you guys. Thank you for having us. I'm Frank Schroth, 39 Avalon Road. I'm a member of the Library Board of Trustees, and I'm here tonight to introduce you to the newest department head in Milton, our new library director, Will Adamczyk. Will comes to us from Quincy, where he was the manager of circulation. Among the responsibilities, he had 25 staff under his supervision. He is the vice president of the MLS. He serves on several committees at OCLN, which is the network, the South Shore Library Network, to which Milton belongs. The search committee had gone through a very exhaustive process and put forward 3 candidates for the trustees to consider. Will was their unanimous first choice. He was unanimously ratified by the trustees. We are thrilled and enthusiastic to have him on board, and I'll say personally, sometimes it's the small things that make an impression on you when you go through this kind of process. In addition to his notable qualifications and experience, I think it was the statement, "I want Milton to lead, not follow," and the attitude that reflects that iced it for me. So without any further ado, Will Adamczyk, the Milton School Committee.
Thank you very much, Frank, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you all for giving me a couple of minutes just to introduce myself tonight. Frank already introduced my professional credentials. I will say that I currently live in Abington, where I'm also involved as a trustee, so I've sat on both sides of the tables at town meetings such as this. In addition, I work with the personnel board in town, so I'm quite involved in town politics and town governing, both professionally and as a citizen. And I'll also say that I have a 5th grader and a 4th grader who I spend any hours I get at home doing homework with and taking to soccer and whatnot. So schools are very important in my life, as you can well imagine. I just want to take 1 minute to say that I'm here tonight to offer my services to the school committee, to the administration, to Mary. Thank you, Mary. You've been very helpful so far to me. To offer my services, offer the services of the Milton Public Library. I look forward to working with you to find out how we can help collaborate to bring library services to the students in Milton, and I look forward to inviting you all to come visit me at the library, individually or as a board. I'd love to host you, show you the services and collections we have to offer you. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I just wanted to say thank you again. I hope to see you at the library. If not, I'll see you here again at one of your meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I might, I was fortunate enough to sit on the interviews, and I want to compliment the Milton Public Library on the thorough search that they did. Even more of a testimony to you, the quality and the caliber of the applicants, the thorough process that the library went through, interviewing every stage. And as Frank said, your interview, your background, your references, it's a wonderful match with the Milton Public Library. Will has already reached out to the Milton Public Schools. We have him scheduled to come and meet with our leadership team, and he's already approached us with ideas. So we are very, very excited about your appointment, and we look forward to strengthening our relationship that's already strong with your creative programming ideas.
Thank you, Mary.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice night.
Next, Chairman Pavlicek, I'd like to ask, why don't we first ask the boys soccer team, the boys soccer coach, and the team members to join us here at the table? Should they bring up chairs? Do they can stand? All right, great. So, Coach, do you want to perhaps sit down and?
Sure. Thank you very much.
Let me read first. We have here with us tonight the champions of the Town Line Cup Trophy, written by the coach. the team qualified for the third straight state championship tournament. Senior Roy Butlin was the Eastern Mass All-Star and a Patriot Ledger All-Scholastic, and the coach gives thanks to the boys for their great effort. The coach, also modest and very, very proud of his players, said he was lucky enough because of his players to win or to really earn the Eastern Massachusetts Coaches Association's Division II South Coach of the Year Award, and he gives full credit, as only Coach Madden would, to his team. And so on behalf of the Milton Public Schools, the school committee can speak for themselves. We were very, very proud of your season this year.
Thank you very much. We're honored to be here. Thank you so much for taking the time to recognize the boys and the effort that they gave this season. We have Captain Brennan Kelly with us, Senior Wayne John, Senior Miguel Rodriguez, Captain Nick Savage, Senior Jesse Bradley, and Senior Roy Butlin, who was our Eastern Mass All-Star this year. They all did a great job. Thank you so much for having us out here tonight. We really appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you
We
very much.
we have a relative of one school committee member, you know, when we have relatives. And,
Can I just, I wasn't able to see as many games as I wanted to, but I can tell you, it was really thrilling to watch you every opportunity that I had. You guys gave it all, and you could tell you tried your hardest throughout the game, and it was a great thing to watch. So congratulations on your accomplishments.
Thank you very much. Thank
and
you.
I always say that I don't think that the players understand the pride that they bring to their school. You know, I often say all the other 1,000 students think that they're out there with you, putting in the time and the effort in your play, and you bring a tremendous amount of pride to your community and to your school and to your peers and to your superintendent and school committee.
Sure.
I'd just like to add something about Coach, because I know that you work year-round on soccer. It's your passion, and in addition to your busy life, you find time for these guys, and you make opportunities, create opportunities for them to play soccer in lots of different venues, and it's because of your tireless effort and their stamina that, you know, we've come this far, and you've come a long way over the years in developing the team. So it's really exciting to watch. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It means a lot. It really does. Thank you, everybody.
Coach has one more event to tell us about.
Yeah, I have a semi-pro soccer team that's going to play locally in the South Shore this year. We're really super excited about it. It's just in the infancy stage. We had our first round of tryouts last week. One of my ex-players, Nick Sullivan, who's been over in Afghanistan now for at least 6 years, I get to chat with him every once in a while online, and we'll let everybody know. We're going to have one of our home games there where Nick's going to be the honorary captain out there, and he comes from a soccer family. All three kids played soccer here at Milton High, and so we'll try to get as many people in the community out and support those guys when we get Nicky home, and it should be a real fun night. It should be great. Excellent. Thank you so much.
very much.
Thank you.
Next, we'd like to invite up our girls volleyball team and their coach, Robin Lee. Come right up, and I'm going to read in Coach's own words, if that's all right, and then she and the players, she can introduce the players. Robin writes, "I believe the girls volleyball team was the only girls fall sport to make it through to the state tournament. Unfortunately, were knocked out in the first round. However, it was from a very tough Westboro team. Not only are we in the toughest league in the state, notably, but also one of the toughest divisions in the state D2 Central. We held our own throughout the match," she writes, "and played exceptionally well, giving Westboro a true run for their money, as noted by their head coach, Roger Anderson. Her captains, she recognizes, were recognized in the Bay State League for their outstanding play this season. Caitlin Griffin was a first-team All-Star, Camille Van Allen, a second-team All-Star, and Christine Murphy, an honorable mention. Caitlin Griffin was also named to the Patriot Ledger All-Scholastics team, as well as to the MGVC, Mass Girls Volleyball Coaches Association All-State League that reports to both the Herald and the Globe. And so I want to congratulate the girls volleyball team, school committee tonight recognizing, and their coach, Robin Lee."
Thank you, Mary, for having us. Thank you, school committee, for having us. It's an honor to be here, and the girls are humbled, I believe. And following Coach Madden is a hard act because I don't have any hardware. However, I will say that last season, and many of the girls carried over into this season, the MIAA did recognize the team for its sportsmanship. They did give us a sportsmanship award last season. It speaks volumes to not only the players, but the parents, because the parents do most of the work. They have raised these kids, and I get them 2 months out of the year. I've had the good fortune of having a lot of them for 4 seasons. Coaching volleyball is my passion. I've been part of the Milton Public Schools coaching for 20 years. I'm a product of the Milton Public Schools, and I'm very proud to be here both as a coach and also as an employee, as a speech pathologist here. So thank you for this honor.
Anything else from the committee? Yeah, Ms. Padera.
Well, I just like to say congratulations. And I did watch that last game with Westboro, and I have to tell you that that was a very tough team, but even till the end, your girls never gave up. And I could tell they still thought they could win. Even at the end, they made like a good run, and you know, we're just trying, and everybody was pushing for them. So, I mean, that's hard to do when you've got you're playing a tough team like that. So congratulations, and you know, be back next year, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
And if I might, it just shows the respect when you mentioned the sportsmanship, the respect with which you watched the soccer team, and the soccer team, the respect that they're showing you staying here. We're very, very proud of all of you. And Robin does live volleyball. We can testify to that, can't we?
So can my family. I don't coach anything else all school year long, but I do love it. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Proud of you. Thank you. Next, we'd like to ask up our PS Site Council under the direction of PS Middle School Principal, Dr. Karen Spalding. And I'll ask Dr. Spalding to make the introductions of the members. Pull some chairs up. Okay, they're not getting your packet. Welcome, PS Site Council, and Dr. Spalding, I'm going to ask you to make the introductions and turn the presentation over to you.
Hello, everyone. It is wonderful to be here this evening, and especially wonderful to have so many members of our site council here. We are almost full site council. We do have one additional member who's our community member who cannot be here this evening. But what I will do is begin by introducing the folks that we have here with us, and then give a little bit of a sense of the agenda, and then we'll get into the fuller part of the presentation. So with us this evening for the Site Council, certainly myself, Karen Spalding, principal of the Pierce Middle School. And instead of going on in the order of this slide, it's probably better to go in order of how we are seated. So I'll start way on your far right, my left, and that is Mr. Check, who's a parent of a student at the Pierce Middle School. Next to Mr. Check is Mrs. Viola, also a parent at the Pierce Middle School. And next to her, we have Mr. Moonen, who is a 6th grade math teacher at the Pierce Middle School. Next to Mr. Moonen is his colleague, Ms. Weber, who is also a 6th grade math teacher at Pierce. And next to her is Mr. Stote, who is a 6th grade science teacher at the Pierce Middle School. To my left, your right, we have Mrs. Flanagan, who is also a parent at the Pierce Middle School. And then to my right here, we have Mrs. Najarian, who is also a parent at the Pierce Middle School. So for this evening, we wanted to present some of the data, not all of the data that we've been looking at, but some of the data that we've been looking at. Just going to shift this microphone for a second. There we go. Better. First, review the data, and then talk a little bit specifically about the achievement gap and what we've done to analyze the data that way, and then talk about the process that we went through as a site council, and then dig into some of the work that we're doing at the school under the school improvement plan. So I'll begin by just talking a little bit about how the Pierce did at each of the grade levels, both in ELA and mathematics, and then for 8th grade include science as well. So in grade 6, students did particularly well, both in ELA and in mathematics, did substantially better than the state. And that first bar that you see is actually advanced and proficient clumped together. And in both advanced and proficient, we were above the state in ELA and in mathematics for grade 6, and below the state in terms of the percent in needs improvement and the warning failing category. We also notice in 6th grade that it's in terms of performance, it's about equal in terms of ELA and mathematics. And we see that change a little bit when we head into 7th grade. In 7th grade as well, students at the Pierce Middle School there was a higher percentage scoring advanced and proficient in both ELA and mathematics, and fewer students in the needs improvement and warning categories relative to the state. And what we see in terms of a trend that begins in the 7th grade is you start in terms of overall performance, the ELA, there are a higher percentage of students in advanced and proficient for ELA compared to mathematics. We also actually see that trend in the state. In 8th grade, that trend continues with Pierce substantially outperforming the state in terms of percentage of students in the advanced and proficient category. And again, this is the aggregate group for now. And particularly proud of the number of students in the advanced category. For example, in 8th grade mathematics, we had 21% more students in the advanced and proficient group, and our advanced numbers are well above the state as well. When we shift to look at the percentage of students who scored advanced and proficient, and in the other two categories as well in science and technology engineering, although Pierce performed above the state, what we notice, especially when we compare it to performance in mathematics, for example, so these graphs represent the same group of students. They're the 8th graders. And what we notice is that we are not as far above the state in the area of science as we were in mathematics. And the conclusion that we've drawn from that, keeping in mind, again, this is the same group of students, and it looks very different in terms of performance relative to the state. And our conclusion from that was that we had work to do in the area of curriculum and in terms of articulating learning expectations for students in science. And you'll hear a little bit more about what that work looks like later in the presentation. In ELA for the aggregate, in terms of both achievement and growth. In terms of student growth, we are above the state, and we're above the state except for 8th grade, which is right around 50, but in terms of achievement, again, above the state. Math, we see a similar thing where we are in terms of achievement above the state in all 3 grades, but in terms of growth, 8th grade is right in the middle there, right at about 49 student growth percentile median. In terms of accountability, we are extremely proud to say that Pierce was determined to be a level 1 school, and what that determination was made because we met the target both in terms of the aggregate and in the high needs subgroups. And we're in the 77th percentile, meaning that Pierce did better than 77% of the middle schools in the state of Massachusetts in terms of the new accountability determination. So we are extremely proud of that. However, we always like to look for ways to grow. And one of the things that we certainly notice is in terms of the low-income subgroup, it did not, that subgroup did not meet the target. The whole high needs subgroup did, which is why we got the determination we did. However, the low income that's part of that group did not meet the target. Also of concern is that the African American Black subgroup barely made the target at 76, and the target, by the way, is 75. So the next couple of slides dig a little bit more deeply into those 2 groups in particular. When looking at the low-income subgroup, it becomes apparent that the only area in which the target was met was growth in mathematics, and that's in terms of, and we concluded that based on how the points were awarded. In addition, students were moved into advanced categories, so if you move a certain percentage of students, 10% of students into the advanced category, you earn extra credit points. Those points were earned in all 3 areas. However, no additional points were earned for moving students out of the warning and failing categories. There we go. We see a similar trend in terms of where the points were earned or where we met the target when we look at the African American Black subgroup. However, a particular note is that there's a lack of any points that were earned in the area in science in any of the areas, and further, no extra credit points for moving students out of warning failing or into advanced area. And so what you see, which is particularly startling, is the number of zeros in that far right column. So we wanted to dig a little bit more deeply into the achievement gap and had a lot of conversation about how to do that. And we thought about it in terms of, or sought questions around that we could use to frame our thinking about and our analysis of the data. And these guiding questions come from a document from the Education Trust, and the citations at the bottom there. But what we looked at were these 4 key questions. Have gaps in performance between student groups decreased over time? In other words, has that achievement gap narrowed? We looked at whether or not there was progress for all. In other words, even if the gap didn't narrow, was there an increase in terms of performance for both groups? What's the magnitude of the gap? And then finally, what does that gap look like compared to other groups, other schools, the state, other groups of students? So those 4 questions are addressed in the next couple of slides. This one over. So first, for the low-income subgroup, have gaps in performance between student groups decreased over time? And the response is, for the most part, no, except for science, which if you compare the first year to the most recent year, there is a bit of a narrowing of the gap. Have all of the groups gained over time, and the conclusion for that was yes. In other words, both groups, sort of imagining on a graph, both lines shifted up a little bit over time. What is the magnitude of the gap between the groups? We noted it was particularly noticeable in science and math. And then how does each group of students currently perform relative to their counterparts in other schools, districts, or states? There's a tool where you can compare schools to comparable schools in terms of socioeconomic and special education population and a couple of other factors. And so we did that with the Pierce and also compared it to the state. And we are, for ELA and math, if we look at our CPI for our low-income subgroup and compare it to the CPI for the low-income group in the state, we are above in both ELA and math, and quite below in science.
Ms. Kelly?
I just have a question. Is that the same cohort of students that you're comparing in the year over year over year?
No, the cohort changes.
Okay, so that's here says
Grade
the whole,
level.
is this, sorry.
Yeah.
Is this grade 8, grade 7, or the whole school?
The whole school. I apologize. Yeah, the whole school. So looking a little more in depth at the African American Black subgroup, using those same 4 questions, have gaps in performance between student groups decreased over time? Yes, they have a little bit, except for science. Have all groups of students gained over time? Again, that shifting up of both lines over time. We concluded yes. What is the magnitude of the gap between groups? It's particularly notable, again, in math and science. It exists in all 3 areas, but particularly notable in math and science. And then how does each group of students currently perform relative to the state? And in similar fashion to the low, or in a similar way to the low-income group, our subgroup compared to the state subgroup, we are above the state in terms of our subgroup's performance relative to the state subgroup. And that is definitely true in ELA, definitely true in math, and science fluctuates. So there were years we were below and years we were a little bit above. There we go. So the previous couple of slides was to dig deeply into, in particular, the low-income subgroup and the African American Black subgroup, because we noticed on that accountability chart that we had not met the target. I also wanted to put the special education subgroup up there because when we look over time, what we see in terms of that subgroup is actually a wonderful good news story. It's a little hard to tell from the science, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to our work ahead. But particularly in language arts and mathematics, what we see over time, and just to sort of situate what you're looking at, so you're looking at the CPI for the special education subgroup for the Pierce Middle School compared to the special education subgroup of the state. And so what we see in 2008 and then over time is rising above the state. So you see that gold line start either at or below, and then over time rise above and stay above. Again, except for science, which we are teasing out a little bit. So the next slide, and I apologize that I've done a lot of the talking. So for the next slide, Mrs. Viola is just going to highlight and brag a little bit about some of the wonderful things that we distilled from the data. Do you want to, we can switch seats or pass the mic? What do we want?
It is really exciting, the results that are taking place around the MCAS at Pierce. the highlights, we just wanted to reiterate some of the same points that Dr. Spalding has already mentioned. We just wanted to reiterate some of the points that Dr. Spalding has already shared with you, just so that we're clear that there's some really exciting and positive things happening at Pierce that are a huge credit to the administration and the teachers in the school. So first of all, Pierce Middle School students do outperform the state by a substantial amount in both ELA and math. 30% of Pierce students scored advanced in ELA, 39% scored advanced in mathematics. When we look at the subgroups, performance when we look at performance in the aggregate and for all subgroups, they have increased in ELA, math, and science. Over time, the achievement gap for the African American subgroup has narrowed in ELA and math, and over time, performance of the special education subgroup has risen above the state in both ELA and math. So I'd like to introduce Mark, I think, to talk about the process that we'll be going through.
So it was a pleasure to be a part of the process for developing the school improvement plan here. Obviously, the first step was taking a pretty long look at the existing Pierce Middle School improvement plan that was out there, asking questions about it, taking a look at some of the goals, some of the challenges that were there, some of the data that existed previously. So that was really our first step, and then of course combining with that the most recent MCAS data, putting it on top of there to see where we left off with the last school improvement plan and how that's kind of continued. We spent quite a few site council meetings discussing various aspects of the previous plan, of the new data, and figuring out how to put that together and what that means and how to really develop a new school improvement plan out of there. And of course, the feedback from the teachers around the table in these meetings were, critically helpful as well. We created this draft and reviewed it, and I think one of the things that we found as teachers and parents and other representatives around this table, probably the biggest lacking part of the previous school improvement plan was really the clarity and measurability of the goals that were in there. So we had quite a few discussions around those and talked about how can we really make sure that as we create the new school improvement plan that these goals are, number one, very clear, and number two, measurable. And when we're talking about measurable, we realized that we didn't want to just use the MCAS as a way of measuring how we're improving as a school. And I'm actually going to hand it over at this point to Gillian as well to talk a little bit about those discussions about measurements and clarity of how we know what to improve.
Right, so you took my opening line, which is perfect. So that meant that we're just sliding seamlessly from one to the other. So we did spend quite a bit of time looking at the articulated goals of the plan and talked about where there was room for further refinement and in some ways bringing down a couple levels of clarity to articulate goals that we could more directly match specific strategies to. Because if the goals are too high and you have a potpourri of strategies, it's hard to know exactly how that strategy is going to get you towards that goal. So we were beginning this year, I think, to mark where are those places where we could spend some time to further drill down the goals. And to find, as Mark said, some ways of assessing not only achievement against those goals, short of that sort of blunt tool that the MCAS is this 1 year sort of formal assessment opportunity, but how can we also measure our progress along the way toward getting to these, reductions of gaps of performance and improving our overall achievement, because that's really a long-term goal. So how do we set goals along the way? How do we set benchmarks that we can hold ourselves accountable to in a more timely and consistent manner that will allow us to say, yes, we're making progress towards the ultimate goal of achievement for all. And so what that's going to call upon the school community to do is to be self-reflective as we are delivering either whether it's a change of service or the new programming that we've put in place in the school improvement plan. And, the teachers are in the room, the staff are there every day. They have a sense as to whether what they're doing is making a difference, whether the children are engaged into the new programming strategies and whether they're seeing differences than when the students first came into whatever the experience is. And so by documenting and dialoguing with one another and having a very open sense of self-reflection along the way, we will be able to engage in mid-course correction, if you will. We'll find out what's really sparking and working and double down on those efforts, that we would see something's not quite working the way we thought. Well, what can we do to tweak this as we're moving along the way, and not wait for the MCAS results, which won't come out until the following end of summer, early fall, to tell us whether this worked or not, because well before those results come out, we will have had to start the decision-making process of what the next year's school improvement plan program resourcing is going to look like. So we just started scratching the surface on this, and we're hoping that by being more aware of this process as we're going through it for this 2012-2013 year, we'll get a jump start on being able to refine our goals in the 2013-2014 school improvement plan.
So the next few slides are to talk about the so what. So we learned these things from the data. And so what are the things that are happening at the Pierce Middle School in terms of the work with teachers and students and families and the community in order to address what we've learned from the data. And so, Mr. Moonen.
The first thing I'm going to talk about is how at the Pierce Middle School we are realigning our curriculum to make sure that we're matched with the new Common Core standards. Last year when I spoke at this meeting, I did speak about how I thought that Pierce was taking a proactive approach to it, and how we looked at the, what the changes were going to have to be in the upcoming years, and I really think that we're taking good strides. In 6th grade and in math in particular, we're doing a lot of project-based learning to make sure that we're finding ways that we can reach all learners. We're also looking for ways in curriculum meetings to make sure that we're raising the bar all across the board to trigger abstract thinking, make sure that students are persevering when problem solving and really looking at real world concepts. And Dr. Spalding's going to speak about the next part.
So a word that you may have heard again and again when I was talking about the data is but in science. And as all of you, I think, know, science is also near and dear to my heart as a former science teacher. And so in looking at the data, we looked at, again, the same group of students. How did they perform in math? How did they perform in ELA? How did they perform in science? And then over time, what did performance look like? Is there a steady climb? Is there a steady decline? Or is it all over the place? What we concluded from what we looked at when we looked at the science data is there, and also in terms of experiences and conversations with teachers, is there is definitely a need to make sure that we have a clear articulation of what the expectations are for student learning in science by grade level, and in addition to that, make sure that there are curriculum materials in place so that students have a consistent, hands-on, inquiry-based experience in science where they're doing science as scientists do, where they're writing about science, reading about science, and doing science. And so we started some of that curriculum implementation this year and are definitely in the process. New science standards are coming out very soon, they keep telling us. However, we have already begun the conversations of what is developmentally appropriate and links with math and other considerations in terms of articulating those learning standards, and are researching and getting professional development on, and thinking about how we can acquire more science materials so that we have those in the hands of teachers and ultimately students.
Also at the Pierce Middle School, we're working very hard on establishing common assessments all across the board. In the math department, we've already had in sixth grade math. We've already had 5 common assessments, and we have 5 more planned throughout the school year. And what that allows us to do is, target what students need for support. We're able to really analyze the data and see what we're doing well and what we can do to improve as teachers. And we're able to do that as a group because we're all giving the same test, and we're able to see what the students are grasping and, again, what they can do to improve. We believe that, as teachers, we should always be reflecting on what we're doing on a daily basis, and we're able to kind of do that as a group with these common assessments. We're looking forward as a math department to share with the other departments that how valuable these common assessments can be for teachers, for us, for the students, for the math department heads, for the administrators, and how important these common assessments are at Pierce Middle School.
So also from the data, we also concluded that there's absolutely a need to provide targeted support to struggling students. And so the work that we've done in that area is, in the way we sort of think about that, is to really put a name with a face and know every single student. We should know every single student in the building anyways, but in terms of supporting struggling students, really know those students and know what they're struggling with and what they need in terms of support. So we began that work with an Excel spreadsheet of every single student, what they have in terms of formal support. So are they in a pull-out special education class, for example? Do they have math investigations? Do they have some other formal support? Are they in a PASS class? Are they in a club? Are they receiving regular support from a teacher after school? Are they being mentored by a teacher or by someone else? And so created this Excel spreadsheet, and then teachers spent time during staff meeting adding to it with information that they knew. And at first brush, what that did is gave us a visual to make sure that no child is falling through the cracks in terms of support and in terms of the kinds of things that we can offer them to connect them to school. And if they are, to make sure that those things get put into place. But the other question that we asked ourselves is what we have in place actually working? And so the data that we're looking at now, we're struggling a little bit with how to analyze it and how to make sense of it, but we're looking at students who have, for example, we have math investigations, which is a second math class for students who are struggling, but who do not receive a special education service for math. And we're looking at the student growth percentiles of that group of students and saying, can we conclude that because of math investigations that child is growing more or not? And we're struggling a little bit because we don't have a comparison group. So we're in conversations about, we have the data and we have it sorted out, but we're in conversations about what kinds of conclusions we can draw from that, and how valid those conclusions are. The other thing that's happening in the math investigations world is making sure that, again, clear articulation of what the expectations are for that class, and that they're aligned with what happens in the regular ed class as guided by the Common Core.
Last thing I'll speak about is how we're aligning instruction with the professional standards of practice. And, I think I've mentioned a lot of it before, but I think the best thing that Pierce did was take a proactive approach to these Common Core standards. And we really started to look at these standards a couple years back and see what we could do to our curriculum so we could kind of take a gradual approach. And we really started to hit the ground running now, and it's very exciting. And I think it's great that we have, an excited and eager group of students and teachers and administrators that are excited to continue to keep going with the Common Core standards and, working with aligning instruction with professional standards and practice.
And Mr. Stote is going to talk a little bit about recognizing students.
Hi, everyone. We've got some exciting new things going on to spotlight and recognize all learners. Pierce is going to have a science fair at the end of February. I'd like to thank Dr. Spalding for taking the lead on this. And I can tell you that I was discussing it today in my classes with my students. And to be honest with you, the excitement was palpable. I mean, they're really charged, and I am personally looking forward to this event at the end of February. The other new thing that's going on, well, I don't know if it's new, actually. Is it? It's new? Our sports teams. We have a boys and girls basketball team. It has started an incredible buzz at the school. I understand that the gym was spilling over at the tryouts. And you really can, I heard the phrase, see the difference. You really can see the difference. Like on game day when members of the team are there with their ties and nicely pressed shirts, and then it's game day and they feel special, and it's a very good thing for their self-esteem. Another way to recognize kids or to, touch areas that may be of interest to them are the past classes. We have lots of choice there. The Pierce Press, photography, creative writing. I personally offer classes in classic movies. And the Green Team, which is a sort of a service learning oriented team, in which I work with a member of the community. I don't know if you know Beth Neville. She's an artist and a member of the Milton Gardening Club, and she's been a great companion with me as we do Green Team projects. There's a lot of choice, and I can tell you that kids have a lot of demands on their time after school, and it can get frustrating because I have a son in 7th grade, Grady, and he's in Pierce Players right now, but he kicks because he would rather take part in these past classes. So, it's good that there's a lot to do, but sometimes it's a struggle. I want to mention one past class that's starting up next week. Mike Lynch, the executive director of Milton Cable Access, is leading this course. I'm very excited about this. This is about TV production. The TV studios are right below my classroom at Pierce. And Mike has reported that kids are aware of this, or they are coming aware of it. Some directly. I know that Mrs. Sykes took the chorus in there and they filmed something. And I recently did an interview with a couple of Pierce players. And Mike reports that kids are always looking in the window, and when the door's cracked open, they actually walk in and say, "What's going on here?" And I frankly think that this is something, I'm so happy it's at the middle school, because I think they're the perfect age for it. Their self-image in a way hasn't hardened. They're ready to take chances, So I'm looking forward to that course. Other things we have going on, we have an effort called the Chain of Kindness. This is to recognize kids who do kind things in school, to make it visible. We write what they did, we make it a link on the chain, and the chain will be displayed prominently in the school. Additionally, we have things like the art shows, which we've had every year, and Student of the Month. So, lots of ways to recognize kids outside the classroom at Pierce. Thanks.
So, some of the work that the teachers have been doing this year in terms of our professional development has been focused on engaging all learners and discussing how do you know a learner is engaged, how can student engagement be increased. And we started that work with our district-wide professional development in August, and then we continued it at the Pierce with our October professional development. And a lot of our talk around how to keep learners engaged has been based on differentiating instruction to meet the needs of all learners. And again, we worked on that both in August and in October at our professional development. We have also been looking at what degree the structure and strategies used are supporting students with special needs. And again, that is through a lot of our work in our common planning times, regular ed teachers working with special ed teachers, and special ed teachers meeting with each other to talk about all the different ways that we can provide accommodations and modifications to make sure that all of our students are successful in the classroom. We have also worked on increasing opportunities for teacher-led professional development. We have done that through both our 10-hour strands and our staff meetings, our monthly staff meetings after school. We've had teachers planning those and running those, which personally has been really nice to have the opportunity to learn from other teachers and hear about what they're doing in their classrooms and what strategies they work. And at our last one, they had the opportunity, we could see what they were using in their classroom, and then also it was still geared towards, it wasn't like we were doing what the students doing, it was still geared towards our profession, like towards our teaching, but using a strategy that we could use with our students as well. And we've also been focused on technology. I know a lot of our classrooms have smart boards, and we would love to have smart boards for all of our classrooms and make sure that there is professional development for teachers so that they're using the technology effectively and not just having tools that they don't know how to use.
So in terms of collaborative relationships and communication, certainly always a goal and will likely remain a goal to ensure that we're increasing communication between the Pierce Middle School and families. And so I write a Pierce Pages newsletter. It was going to be called the Pierce Press, but that's the newsletter that the students write, so I had to come up with a new name. So Pierce Pages comes out every 2 weeks, and it's both a message from me as well as highlighting things going on in the building, and information about upcoming dates and events and photos and things like that. And in terms of Edline use, we have actually a wonderful Edline mentor in Mrs. McKay, who has been offering sessions before school and after school to support teachers in using Edline and getting creative about how to offer information to parents and students, and so that they can better partner with us in the work and we can better partner with them. We've worked on developing community partnerships. I'm extremely excited to talk about both the Curry College volunteers that we've had. We've had some athletes from Curry College who come and assist in PE classes, and in addition are coming to help out with the Pierce basketball teams. And in addition, we have a new program that will be starting the end of January that's called the Eye to Eye program, which is it's actually a national program that was started some years ago, and we are joining with Curry to offer it to some of our students. It's a mentoring program that matches college students with learning disabilities and/or ADHD, and matches them with middle school students who also have learning disabilities. And they meet once a week for about 8 to 10 weeks, and there's a new art project that they do each week, and they build a mentoring relationship around that art, which has a lot to do with expressing sort of who I am and what I'm good at, and those kinds of things. So we're very excited that program, will be starting soon. In addition to that, in terms of PD, we've been partnering with Forbes Museum has been wonderful in collaborating with us and offering that content area expertise. And they did that with us for the October Day and have been working very closely with Amy Gale. We also had a scientist from MIT on the October Day who also has continued conversations with Ms. Gilbert in developing the iSTEM course. And then finally, just really thinking broadly about the way and trying to broaden our definition of what it means to participate, for families to participate in school, and making sure that we provide a wide range of opportunities for families to do that. the work that we're doing in terms of the making sure that we are both meeting the expectations in terms of the bullying law, but also because it's what we should be doing in our work. We are restructuring, we look closely at the anti-bullying curriculum and have done some revision both to the structure, the way in which we implement it, as well as the actual lessons, because we wanted to be able to say with 100% confidence that every student in the Pierce Middle School experienced this set of lessons in 6th grade, and a different set in 7th grade, and a different set in 8th grade. And so we created a structure so that we could say that with full confidence. And in addition to that, again, on that idea of expanding opportunities for families to engage, the work of the Diversity Committee at the Pierce Middle School has focused a lot on, again, creating these opportunities for families to feel welcome at the Pierce Middle School. And Family Fun Night is one example of that, where families, we will have mini workshops run, and we'll be recruiting community members and families to run mini workshops for parents and their children. Everything from flower arrangements to sewing to tax preparation wasn't really a highly attended session last year, so we probably won't offer that again this year. But the idea is just to come and to learn a little bit side by side with your children. Risk-taking and innovation. I've been waiting for this slide. So we, again, trying to sort of expand our ideas, think about how we can use resources creatively and efficiently, and take a little bit of a risk. We piloted the iSTEM course this year, and I'm going to hand the microphone over.
Hi, I'm Amy Flanagan again. Before I even talk about the iSTEM, I just want to say that when Mr. Jett said he was leaving, I remember reading the email and crying. I was so sad, and I thought, this is it. And I have to say, Dr. Spalding, I didn't know her before, but she has come in and just picked up the ball and run with it, and just Pierce is evolving and growing, and she's just meeting the parents' wildest expectations. And, you know, parents can have some wild expectations. So it's been it's been a great year. And, you know, the sports teams, the science fair, the newsletters that we get, they've all been just really great additions to what Pierce already was. But one of the things that's really hit my home great is the iSTEM program. And I don't know if you all know about it, but it's a special science class for 7th graders who are really passionate about science. And it's kind of this grade is kind of a weird grade. There's a lot of kids really passionate about science. My son asked for bismuth for Christmas, and he got it. And you know, he has another son who he has a friend who's like charting firefly behavior in his backyard, and they're all individually doing these, you know, crazy science things, and now they have a place to come together and explore it. And you know, they tend to be kids who are really into school and learning, and here's this class, and there's no grade, which is awesome. Like they're just there to explore and learn. And I asked my son today, I'm like, I want you to give me some specific things about iSTEM that I can talk about. He's like, it's just awesome, Mom. It's just awesome. I'm like, no, I want something specific. It's just awesome. I'm like, I'm going to be talking to Superintendent Gormley. Oh, okay, well. And he just started talking about being in this group of like peers, and everybody in there is just really passionate, and they're talking about science all the time, and it doesn't feel like school, and they're just having a great time. And they're really excited about the science fair as a group, and I just think it's been a great opportunity for the students, and it's also been a great opportunity for peers to take advantage of these kids who are really into science.
I'll share one more story about the iSTEM course, and then I promise we'll move on. Ms. Gilbert, who's been working on developing the course and obviously teaching the course, has a habit of sending me 10 o'clock at night emails about what she's found, and she sent one because there was a student, so the participation in the science fair is mandatory for students in the iSTEM course, and there was a student who wanted to investigate the effect of electromagnetic waves on cancer cells, and wondered where she could get some, so that she could do that. And she actually Googled, and apparently you can get them online. So we're going to shape that a little bit, but that then evolved into a potential partnership with the student and a scientist in a lab. So there are some great things that we're learning in this pilot course that we are so excited to figure out how to expand and get more kids involved, for sure. A lot of good things are coming out of that course, as well as many other things at Pierce. So I mentioned the Eye to Eye program a little bit earlier in terms of a mentoring program. We also have recruited, and many Pierce teachers who do so many things for students also go above and beyond by taking a couple of students under their wing, as we like to say, meeting with them once a week during lunch or after school or before school, and kind of checking in with them. And that goes onto that Excel spreadsheet to make sure that we're doing everything we can for all students. And in addition, we are looking at ways to expand leadership opportunities for students. So we certainly have Student Council, which is up and running and doing amazing things. Another leadership opportunity that we just initiated recently is a group of students will be working with me to plan some events for Black History Month, and so they'll be meeting with me over lunch, and we'll brainstorm some ideas for what they want to do. But again, just this idea of expanding how we think about really engaging kids in school and providing opportunities for them. So Mrs. Viola was very kind when she transitioned to her slide. What really happened at the Student Council meeting when I was presenting the slides was the feedback was that I wasn't bragging enough about the Pierce Middle School because I was so focused on problem solving. And so this last slide is really to capture some more of the wonderful things that are happening at the Pierce Middle School. Pierce Middle School athletic teams cannot say about what basketball now, track later, what it has done for the entire school community. And again, if you had been in that building on December 20th with students dressed in their red and white, and the students on the team walking around just that head a little bit higher than it was the day before, in their shirts and ties or in their uniforms, and stories of parents saying, teachers and students, their child reporting teachers and students who didn't even know them or they didn't know coming up to them and saying, good luck this afternoon. And it was just a really good feeling. And side note, both the girls team and the boys team did beat Galvin Middle School this afternoon. Pierce players will put on their production of When in Rome, January 17th and January 18th. And I do not know how Mr. Deshane does it, but he takes 100 students at the beginning of the year who barely know each other and transform them as a group of a cast and crew into what becomes an unbelievable Broadway production. And I'm sure that many of you have already witnessed that, but we definitely want to invite the entire community to come and see the production that's happening on the 17th and the 18th. In addition, just want to say out loud again how thankful and appreciative the entire Pierce community is for all of the donations to we've done a number of drives and have helped a lot of families, and it is absolutely reflective of how giving this entire community is. We get to see it through your children, but it's just amazing what they have done. And actually added to that list, we also did create some snowflakes and sent them down to Sandy Hook Elementary School. The PTO down there was looking for snowflakes to decorate the new space that the students were going to be in. So we Some of our students made both two-dimensional and three-dimensional, of course, that's the art department, and we sent them down for those children. And then finally, if you were anywhere near the high school just before the holiday break, you may have stumbled upon the Pierce Middle School music performances, which were amazing and were attended by droves of parents and family members. So many so that at the last minute I pulled all 130 sixth graders into the hallway to free up the seats. And then realized I had to do something with the 130. And I think one of our school committee members may have walked by while I was trying to entertain them. Yeah, that's one of those great moments that you live for. But the talent, amazing in terms of the music and also the art. We also had the Winter Arts Festival just before vacation as well. So thank you so much, and I'm sure you might have some questions, but just really want to thank you for the opportunity for sharing with you what's going on over at Pierce.
Comments from the committee? Mr. Walker.
Wow. I've spent quite a bit of time over the last year and a half on student achievement and achievement gaps, and I have to say that I am quite impressed. And compliments to the team. It's clear that you've not only thought about this, but have approached this in a way that is certainly going to result in some improved results. So I have some questions now. I'm officially inviting myself to your next school site council meeting so that I can ask some more questions. And a preview on that, I'd like to hear more about the student action planning and more about the benchmarks and success measures that Ms. Najarian talked about. But for tonight, the question is, do you have the resources that you need right now to take on these challenges? So I heard smart boards for the remaining classrooms. What else?
Science curriculum materials, absolutely. And then the other thing that off the top of my head, the other thing that we are, because we've added a new way of collecting data to identify students early on, that has led us into the conversation of how do we support students in reading in particular at the Pierce. And so one of the things that we did this year that is new is the Scholastic Reading Inventory, and then followed up with some students with the qualitative reading inventory. And we have identified a number of students in sixth grade that we need to provide some targeted reading support to. And so we are in conversations about how to make that happen now, but moving forward, really, and time will tell through those conversations whether we can do it within our existing structure or if it would require additional staffing or whatever the case may be. But when we look at those students, those subgroups in particular, those students who are not reaching the level that we would hope, those are the same students who, some of whom are still struggling with decoding, let's say, in sixth grade. And so it's led into this whole wonderful conversation about really how can we best use our existing resources in terms of support and what else might we need. And that all came through this new data that we now have early on so that we can really target that support.
Just one more question and a comment. So do you have a date for the science fair?
Yeah.
28th. And I would close with by saying probably that the highest compliment you can be paid is what Ms. Flanagan's son said. Anytime you're engaged in an academic undertaking and it doesn't feel like school, doesn't get any better than that. So congratulations, all of you.
Ms. Sharon.
I'd just like to thank you for an amazingly broad-based but very comprehensive school improvement plan. We talk a lot, usually we call these whole school improvement plans, and I think that your whole school should be capitalized, because you haven't left a stone unturned, really, in terms of student need, teacher need, professional development, support. It was just wonderful. But for me, honestly, the most exciting part was the fact that your parents can speak so articulately to this plan, and it's clear that they know it and own it just as much as the teachers and the leadership team. So I think this is really exciting. I think that you're just doing great work, and I look forward to hearing more wonderful things.
Bagley Jones.
Just a couple of things, and before I forget, under your peer students and family care, can we add caps for cats for the walk-a-thon that's coming up? February 9th, last year you promised me that you would do it this year, because, so, and everybody's gonna help her with that, right? Okay. For $1, kids get to wear, and staff get to wear caps for the day, and the money goes to the walk-a-thon. Little plug in there. I mean, you're helping all these other folks, so.
Absolutely.
Charity begins at home. But a couple of thoughts. You know, Pierce is where all the elementary schools come together, right? So we've had all the elementary schools in, and then all of a sudden, voila, they're all at Pierce. And, you know, my kids did that, and it's a tough adjustment. So I just do want to say that, because I also think, you know, what's that saying, dropout prevention starts in kindergarten. You know, it's not grade 6 or grade 10. It starts in kindergarten. So we are, as Ms. Gormley says, we really are a team. And I also want to acknowledge the human faces of all of you. You know, you're all teachers working really hard, and parents, and the kids, because we talk about them as, you know, the kids of color, the kids of less income, the kids with special needs, the kid, and it's not us talking that way, it's the way the state makes us talk, but these are all kids that we're talking about, and teachers who are working really hard. So, and I say that because I want to say it's really great to see the growth, but I have to admit, I was sort of sitting here shrinking a little bit going, ooh, what's going on with science? Ooh, what's going on with grade 7? You know, so I want to be really positive because you all are working really hard, but then what's going on with science and what's going on for our kids with less income? And I don't know. And MCAS is not the only measurement of growth, in my opinion, at all. I think it should just be one measurement of growth. The state mandates it is the growth, and so I think, as Leroy said, you are coming up with some really great ideas, and Linda Lee said it too. I'd be really interested in hearing more and more of them, like the Excel spreadsheet. I absolutely love. I know the amount of work that would take, but I just want to ask: is that for all students or for the students who are struggling on MCAS?
We're ultimately doing it for all students. To date, we've only done it for the struggling students so far.
So what I would plug for, and I know how many students do you have now, Pierce?
897.
Yeah, so you would have your work cut out for you for the next 12 years to do it. But it's those students we lose sight of because maybe they do okay on the MCAS, but they're really struggling on other things. And so the next year, maybe they don't do so well. So I love the idea of kids really being identified and known. I worked at one school where they took a whiteboard and they wrote every kid's name down in grade 7. It was like 200 kids. And if there were no checks next to the kid's name, then those kids got assigned a mentor because nobody knew them. So it's those kids that I worry about too.
Yep.
And I know you do too, Karen, from working on committees with you and all of you. But I guess I would just really plug for the silent strugglers. They don't show up, but they're going to show up somewhere. And then I'll be done. When is the parent night for STEM, parents entering grade 1?
That night is January 31st.
Okay. And then the iSTEM program that Amy talked about, and I wasn't here, the school committee meeting where you all talked about it being for kids who do well already. Is that what the criteria was in science? So I guess I sort of struggled. I did then, but I wasn't here, so I couldn't speak up. What about the kids who really need that hands-on experience but don't test well? Like, aren't those the kids, some of the kids we're trying to reach, and the kids who don't have to worry about a grade, who can do the hands-on activities? Like, what are we doing for those kids if they can't get into this iSTEM program because they don't test well, but they need it? So what do we do about those kids? Am I understanding it correctly?
Absolutely. So the way the students were selected this year for the pilot was based on their 6th grade math scores. And so we began with sort of did them by scale score and invited them in that way. And it's absolutely a pilot, and it was, the intent was twofold, both to create this STEM, sort of intensive STEM experience where comments like we heard would be used to describe what it was like for students. But then also to see what it looked like to create an experience for students who were really interested in science. And in a similar way to where we have honors chorus, and a similar way to where we have the basketball team, so to provide this opportunity for students who had a particular interest and a particular affinity possibly for that particular area. But at the same time, as a pilot, our intent is to learn from that and figure out how to create additional STEM opportunities for all students. And so we've kind of got a couple of goals in mind in terms of what we want to learn from doing this. And so we absolutely are committed to expanding STEM opportunities. I actually serve as one of the co-chairs on the STEM committee, and that's part of our conversation, is to expand STEM opportunities for all students at the middle school. But again, we're experimenting with this idea of also what does it look like to provide students who, the Firefly student and the student who wanted that for Christmas, and whatever the case may be, what does it look like when you provide an opportunity for those students? And so we're definitely planning on expanding it and creating those opportunities for all students, as well as the science curriculum work, which is again through the science classes, creating those opportunities for everyone.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Are any of our students who are struggling in science in the iSTEM course?
No.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there are.
And can I,
It's like twofold. There's so much work being done across the science curriculum for every student.
Absolutely.
I guess my point is the way you reach kids who are struggling in science is to give them some fun, hands-on, non-sitting in a class type experience, so I would really push for that.
Absolutely, and we have two new hands-on science units, one in 6th grade, one in 7th grade, and so that work is absolutely happening, and so we lay out sort of a plan for adding those curriculum units in the school improvement plan, and definitely,
I made my point.
absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Walker, you had a...
So I think I should give Dr. Spalding some support. We did have a lengthy discussion about this that evening, and that point was made. But I, for one, felt strongly that when you have so many students who had worked very hard and scored advanced, and you had fewer seats than the number of students who scored advanced, my thought was, how could we not first offer this opportunity to them? There will certainly be some benefits, and I've, as I said, spent the last year and a half arguing for people who are struggling. But in this particular case, I thought that we had an obligation first to those individuals who had scored advanced to say, would you be interested? And if enough of them said no, then we go to proficient. But we spent a lot of time talking about that.
Ms. Padera.
Great job. I was very impressed, and I had no doubt that Mr. Walker, who said he's not easily impressed, would also be impressed. So it's not surprised.
She did say that.
I did. I wanted to, I just reiterate, everybody says, I like that you looked at everything within the school, and there's so many parts of the Pierce that should be highlighted and that we look at, that, especially some of the things you're talking about, which is what I've, become more aware of recently, is the importance of teaching children citizenship as a way of learning, just to highlight. And of course, the sports teams, I'm all for it, and all the activities, not just educating, in the classroom, but outside the classroom, creating a great community, which is really, really important. We were talking about going to the middle school and getting those parents, keeping them still involved, because that's a time where it can kind of tend to split. but, a lot of times, we want to keep them together. One of the questions I had, you mentioned early on in the data that you tend to see the ELA scores kind of go up and the math go down after 7th grade, starting with the 7th grade and continuing with that. And I'm just wondering if you looked at what are the reasons for that? It just brought to mind some of the talk about science and math becomes less relevant, less, inspiring, which I think the iSTEM class is a great example of trying to get kids more inspired and excited about math and science. But do we have any ideas of why that tends to split that way? And because when we looked at the subgroups, it seemed to be the same thing. The gap also widens, and it just seems to be kind of piling on. So I didn't know if we looked at, for some of the reasons outside of curriculum, is there anything else going on there?
Well, in terms of the expectations for math, when you hit 7th grade is typically that's when the pre-algebra, although there's algebraic thinking throughout the Common Core, even in the elementary grades, that's really that pivotal year where it starts to get far more abstract. And so for students who may not be developmentally ready for that, might not have as solid a foundation in terms of both basic skills, but also just thinking flexibly in terms of mathematics, that's where things start to fall apart in terms of the expectations that kick in 7th grade and 8th grade. So and that's kind of our hunch about what's going on. And so the amazing work that the math teachers are doing, they started it they started it years ago, but the conversation most recently in the summer work and definitely in their curriculum meetings this year has been around aligning with the Common Core, and what that has meant is really raising, so it's fewer number of things, but it's deeper understanding. And so they've been having a lot of conversations about how to support students making math relevant, but then also giving them concrete materials to really dig deeply into those mathematical ideas.
Fantastic. I also just wanted to mention, too, I did really like how you mentioned not just things that, support groups that you're working on with students, but also analyzing whether those are working and what is working, what's not working, what else can we try. I mean, that's really specific. We can say we're offering all the support groups in the world, but, are they working, and are they working for all students? Which students, I just thought it was fantastic. So thank you again.
Ms. Kelly.
Congratulations on not only a wonderful presentation, but I think I've been at this table for a number of years. I think this is the biggest site council representation I've ever seen, which is to be commended. But the fact that you can all speak to aspects or even be as engaged as you are is just a statement about how powerful a site council and the whole site council at every single school can be. And I guess my question for you is, it's great to be able to present at a school committee meeting and have, TV playing it, but do you have other opportunities to engage your parental community in the great things that obviously they're living some of what you're talking about, but sort of the data and that kind of stuff. How are you engaging your parental community, and even the kids for that matter, in the great work that you guys are doing?
That's a question that was actually asked at our diversity committee meeting yesterday. Wait, no, that was this morning at 7 a.m. Feels like it. Yes, I've lost track a little bit of the days. That very question, especially when we started to dig into some of the subgroup data and that kind of thing, is raising the question of how do we communicate this? Certainly anyone who's watching has seen it, and the PowerPoint will be on the website, but really how do you dig in and have conversations with families that then result in some real change and real understanding in the community? One of the things that I did co-facilitated with a parent at the Pierce in, I think it was November, was engaging in a conversation, just a very comfortable, relaxed conversation with parents of students with special needs, and intentionally co-facilitated it with a parent so that it could be, again, a healthy conversation of what have your experiences been like at the Pierce, and what are your ideas, and what are your hopes, and things like that. In addition, the conversations that we've had in the diversity committee, sort of within our smaller group, we have the district-wide Citizens for Diverse Milton event tomorrow afternoon, where we'll dig specifically into the data as well. And again, this ongoing conversation of just trying to figure out a wide range of ways in which to connect with and engage families. And so we had a 6th grade level coffee for families to come in. We're doing one for 7th grade coming up, and one for 8th grade. And again, just different times of day, different structures, different environments to engage the community is definitely part of our conversations and planning.
And I guess many, many moons ago, I served on site council at Cunningham, and you always felt it was difficult to engage. Like, you guys do great work, and it's not like anybody comes to your meetings to listen because it's difficult, right? But is there a way to think about that? Because I think ultimately you guys are a great example of what, when site councils were created and put into law, what the vision was. To be so engaged in your community that you know who your kids are and what their needs are, and are basically forming programs to meet their needs, and I think it's fabulous, so I can only encourage you to continue. And then one other question I had, just on the science program, what is the ratio of girls to boys? Do you have a sort of a sense of what that is?
I don't know off the top of my head, although those are the kinds of things that I tend to glance at, and I believe it's fairly balanced, but I'll get that data back to you for sure.
Ms. Gorman?
I too would like to thank the teachers, parents, guardians, and Dr. Spalding for the time and effort you put into this work. Your presentation and your work speaks for itself. We're a system, and so to Mr. Walker's point, and Ms. Bagley-Jones alluded to with the achievement gap, again, the system-wide initiative to come up with individual plans. We've said at this table that works, and you could see the results in special education, and our goal is to use those Excel spreadsheets to come up with individual plans so that we know the progress of every single child, and we're responsible for the progress and the achievement of every child. Also, again, at this table, we're responsible for getting you those important dollars to do the work. And Mr. Walker alluded to and asked what are the resources that you need. And so I think it's important when we've presented the budget. Dr. Spalding, you should all know, is a very vocal lobby at our leadership meetings. And to 2 points, science materials at the middle school are a priority, one of the top 3 priorities of our advancement budget, our entire Milton Public School budget. And it was interesting that Dr. Spalding's experience, having been at the elementary school, when we speak to early literacy, she speaks and lobbies that really early literacy, if you concentrate on grades K1 and 2, the issues that she spoke to in grades 6 and 7, if we concentrate on early literacy. So your experience at the elementary school and now at the middle school has really brought those 2 priorities, early literacy, closing the achievement gap, and science, as priorities for, under the leadership of this school committee, to our advancement budget, which is really our Milton Public School budget. And I'm sure these parents know, but for the viewing audience, science materials at the Pierce School, we had many needs and priorities in the district. The entire leadership team met together to prioritize, and science materials at the Pierce School did rise to the top of our budget priorities. So to Ms. Kelly's point, every single Pierce parent, community member in the schools and in the town would be proud of the work that you have done, and the Pierce School, the teachers, the staff, the parents. Thank you.
I just want to sort of say, to sum up, people have said so many things about your presentation. I just want to make one little point that I think is easy to miss. When we first started talking about standards-based curriculum a bunch of years ago, and then we got into the Massachusetts frameworks and where they exist anyway, and then finally into Common Core, it was all about, what are we teaching in this grade, what are we teaching in that grade? And what I'm happy to hear here is really the extension of that. We're not talking about the standards for content. We're talking about the practice standards here. What makes effective instruction? The fact that the students are, reading and writing about whatever subject it is they're doing, math, science, whatever, that they're engaging in problem solving, and it's how they approach the subject, not what the subject is that they approach. And that's the next step on beyond, are we teaching the right subject in 6th grade? And it's good to hear we're not even talking about, are we teaching the right things? It's, how are we engaging all the students so that they see all the right things and they're getting them in creative ways and move forward. So the fact that we're not talking about, how much algebra are we doing in grade 5, the way we were several years ago when the standards were just getting started, it shows that it's become a progression and it's going in the right direction. So I thank you all very much. It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to ask to the table our Technology Director, Bob Patterson. Welcome, Mr. Patterson. And each year, we ask Mr. Patterson to come to explain really the technology plan, the commitment we have, the responsibility to the state to submit, have the school committee vote the broad objectives of that technology plan, and then Mr. Patterson and Mr. Phelan will outline for you our technology committee that's working on implementation. Welcome.
So every year at about this time, I am required by the state to submit an update to our technology plan that includes our goals for the previous year and, our accomplishments from the previous year and our goals for the next year. And that is required in order to receive E-rate funding from the federal government, that when we get 40%, or actually we're up to 41% discount off of telecommunication services like internet, phone, and some internet-related services, such as website hosting, all of the Edline we get reimbursement on as well. And this year, not only did I have to do the update, but also the long-term plan, which you should all have. And the way that long-term plan was written is the state puts out a set of guidelines, and they're all benchmarks for different goals, vision, implementation strategy, budget, integration, staffing, professional development, access to technology, and they've changed a lot of the numbers and ratios based on the progression of the technology, and they've also added some benchmarks as far as security and safety and data retention. So I went through benchmark by benchmark and tried to address each one in the plan. And we've also, there's a committee that John Phelan created that it's made up of administrators and teachers that are, the goal is, well, excuse me, Mr. Phelan, you can probably better articulate what the goal is.
Sure. We as we talked at this table prior, we have presented a technology plan moving forward for the hardware and the purchases that we think would be beneficial to the district. So Mr. Gillis and Mr. Patterson have worked hard around the wireless protocols and procedures and materials that are needed, as well as the networking and the behind-the-scenes things that are needed for the district to move forward. We then established a second committee that would work on what would it look like in the classroom? What's the education side of technology that we want to make sure that we are in line with the best practices and the innovation that's happening and changing, quite frankly, on a monthly basis. So that group is led by Holly Concannon, John Redden, Sean Walsh, and a series of teachers that are taking part. Their short-term goal was to prepare presentations for all the groups that we were going to present to, i.e. We had a capital committee request, we had a request from a donor. The Milton Foundation for Education has a technology theme this year. So the short-term goal of that committee is to prepare presentations and answer the question, what does technology look like in the classroom? How do students use it? How do parents use it? I mean, how do teachers use it? They have met with the Milton Foundation on 2 occasions already, and just a little highlight of the foundation dinner coming up in March. They really have some very, very unique and cutting-edge technology pieces to the night that will be very telling as to what we are doing in the schools and how that's all good things for teaching and learning, but also enjoyable for the members attending the dinner that night to take part in the auction. The second goal that they have that is more long-term is to begin to piece out a 3-year plan on what types of devices should the school system purchase to address different types of learning opportunities for students and teaching strategies that teachers can use technology for. So we look forward to Matt and Bob continuing to do the back of the house work, which is the networking and the wireless and the switches and the servers, and the committee work that we have in place this year that will go into next year, really identifying what some of the best technology is in moving slowly on it, because the technology is changing, so we don't want to jump right into all iPads or jump right into all Kindles or jump right into all clickers, but we want to go in and have a differentiated approach to how we purchase devices, pilot devices, look at the different learning opportunities and student experiences that they have, and then evaluate how we move forward. So we look forward to the results of that committee's work. We thank everybody on that committee, and this was initiated and led by Mr. Gillis and Mr. Patterson earlier, with, again, the support of the Capital Committee, this school committee, as we approach the back of the house side in the networks and the materials, et cetera.
Thank you. And also speaking to the point of not being married to one certain technology going forward in regards to wireless tablets, we are piloting iPads at Tucker right now. Here at the high school, Jessica Parsons' lab has 7 Android tablets, and the students are writing applications for the tablets. And one I know that she has written with the students, it's designed for texting in the car. It knows by GPS if you're moving, and if you get a text or a call, it will respond to that person with a message saying you're driving, and they'll get back to you. And that's something that they're designing now, which is obviously very useful. I know Jonathan Redden has some Kindles in use at Cunningham, and also this week we just purchased a couple of Google Chromebooks. So they're a much more cost-effective solution as another means of wireless device, getting the technology in the hands of the kids. They're less than half the cost of an iPad, and we're really looking forward to getting them in our hands to see what we can do with them and what the kids can do with them. And a big part of it, selfishly for me, is how they can be managed on a larger scale, because we've found out the hard way that iPads are very difficult to manage in a large scale. And the licensing is very cumbersome and time-consuming. And these Chromebooks, we're hoping it's going to be a little bit better. And that might, if anybody that knows Jonathan Redden, he is as Mac-centric as they come, and he had an epiphany the other day, and he admitted it. So that's pretty exciting, too. Hopefully we'll have those in next week.
Well, and I'd just like to say that the committee that is made up for the What Does It Look Like in the Classroom committee is teachers from every level. So we have elementary teachers, middle school teachers, and high school teachers, obviously administration, and we have community outreach, or community member, and it actually is Linda Lee Sheridan on our school committee will be attending and being a member of that committee as well. So we're really looking forward to all the, them dipsticking all the different technology that's out there and starting to talk about what the district would benefit by over the next 3 years. So I just wanted to make sure that we gave the credit to all those folks that are taking time during school and after school to take part in these committee meetings on behalf of the Milton Public Schools.
Mr. Walker.
So, Mr. Phelan, are we expecting a report from that committee or some recommendations from that committee, and if so, when?
The next 3 meetings they have will lead up to the MFE event for March. So their primary focus right now is to prepare for the MFE event, and they have meetings January 15th, 29th, and February 12th in preparation for that. I believe that their bigger picture work in terms of their 3-year plan, we could expect an update from them sometime later in the spring.
Thank you, Jones.
A couple of questions. Thank you for all this information. Do you know how many smart boards we have now, as of today, in the whole system?
I don't know the exact number. It's approximately 150 or so. I have a spreadsheet of all of them. And this week, I just ordered 3 more for Cunningham. The Girl Scouts and the PTO bought 3 more.
Because it would be helpful to know out of how many classes we have how many smart boards, because we're always saying we could use more smart boards, but what does that actually really look like? Is it we're missing 50 or we're missing 5,000?
I can tell you we're missing 22 at Pierce, and...
Missing meaning they never had them? Not
Yes,
missing,
the classrooms,
yeah.
We
right.
didn't lose any.
We didn't
Right,
lose
right, we
any.
haven't,
Thank
not
you.
yet.
Mounted on the wall.
But at Pierce, there are 22 classrooms without them, and that's including the rest that go with the speakers. And at Collycott and Cunningham, there were 8. So now with these 3, there'll just be 5.
And at the high school, we're pretty full?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
that's what I thought. Okay, so then, the smart boards don't come into the classroom, they come into the classroom whether the teacher's trained in them or not?
Yes.
Yes.
So they could sit there all year and not be used, conceivably, if the teacher doesn't know how to use it.
Every teacher that, we offer 10 hours of professional development a year, and teachers are expected to, or have available to them, smart board training in August and throughout the year through their 10 hours. Some are more proficient with them than others.
Yes.
And that's definitely how we differentiate the PD. We have beginners smart board training, which is how do you turn it on, how do you use it. Then we have strategies for using it in the classroom would be the second higher level functioning. And the highest functioning, if we describe it that way, would be content-specific training with use of a smart board as it relates to the curriculum that you're teaching. So,
But does everybody have to do that, or is that voluntary? Does everybody have to be trained, every educator have to be trained in use of a smart board?
I would say comfortably that every educator who received a smart board in their room over the last 5 years has had a level of training in smart board, in technology.
I think what I'm trying to get is, A, on page, under budget, it says benchmark 2. The goal is to increase percentage of staff that uses technology in the classroom every day to at least the 90% benchmark.
What page is that?
It's not, 7, is there a 7 on it? It's at the bottom. Oh, yeah, sorry, page 7. Technology and integration. Technology integration and literacy benchmark 2. So how are we measuring who knows what, who's doing what? And like, John, you said, there's different levels. I mean, I know I just got a new iPhone, and I have to beg for help from my kids. Can I please have a lesson today, So, my point is, the kids know more than we do about the technology. So if the teachers aren't required or doing a certain level of training, kids could run the show.
In the current kids could run the show, period. I mean, there's a lot of students that know a whole lot more about technology in every school across America. In the current evaluation tool, there is a criterion of use of technology in the classroom. So that is a rubric or a feature of everybody's evaluation that's assessed.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
That could change and may be modified with our new evaluation tool that we will progress through and come up with for next year, but that's a current standard for every teacher.
Ms. Gorley,
May I speak to the smart boards? I think that we have to give prior Superintendent Dr. Jaffoon a tremendous amount of credit. and she had a vision to start these smart boards in the kindergarten. And putting them in the kindergarten drove the elementary teachers. I was the first-hand observer of how the smart boards, moving up to first, second, and third grade, really drove the children. The students came into those classrooms having used the smart boards. It drove the teachers to learn how to use the smart boards. They share integrated lessons. I think it would be worth a presentation on how the smart boards are used in the Milton Public Schools, because it's been such an investment. Ms. Padera and I finished her last tour of the Cunningham the other day, and I could tell when we went into one classroom, we still have an email going back and forth, that when we finished the tour and I got away for 24 hours, I said the room that we went into that didn't have the classroom, that teacher needed that smart board. That instruction would have improved, it would have been more interactive with the children, and we're going back and forth. Where was that smart board? What, when is that teacher going to have a smart board? So I have termed these smart boards as almost a third of some Milton Public School teachers, and I think it'd be worth a presentation, very valuable for the public. So we started the initiative in the kindergartens, but we have to recognize, no one really asked the question, the Girl Scouts. We have had the PTOs at every school step up so that at the elementary level, we're close and working collaboratively with the capital committee to completing at the elementary and then moving on to the middle school. And at the high school, we really have to recognize the Copeland Foundation and the Hillside Fund for really enabling us to almost be completely a smart board high school. I would tell you, I went with John Drotter, perhaps 12 years ago, to a New England organizational meeting of high school principals and superintendents, and a Connecticut superintendent stood up and identified himself 12 or 13 years ago as a smart board high school principal, and I said, what the heck is he talking about? And I totally understand now, and we talk about the technology changing and the handheld devices, but it would be worth, to Ms. Bagley-Jones's question, a night to actually see sample lessons. And what impresses me, why you have to see it to believe it, is the work of the students at the elementary level using these smart boards. So it's not just a substitute for a teacher using a whiteboard, or in your day, my day, a blackboard. These students are interactive using this smart board, and I'll give you a perfect example, not to belabor this. In a high school English class, when we went to school, a reference comes up about a play or a piece of poetry. Leroy, could you go to the library and get that reference for us and come back? It's a lost teachable moment. I've witnessed in the English classes, bringing the reference up on the smart board. In math, I don't know how people learned math with these without the smart board, and the way the smart board enhances the math lessons. It's amazing. So to Ms. Bagley-Jones's point, I think a brief presentation for the public to actually see it in the school committee on how the smart board is used would be phenomenal.
Ms. Kelly, then Mr. Walker.
I definitely think a presentation like that would be of great benefit. But I am concerned about the report here. So, historically, we've talked about even the use of Edline, and that we don't have 100% compliance on the use of Edline. And not that I want to add more to the list of things that teachers need to do, but I think in our plan, it says here, I think if you go on to the next paragraph, that the percentage of in-class usage is somewhat lower, approximately 80%, and we intend to increase that percentage by 90% by the end of the year 14-15. I would say if we're asking Foundation for Education and other volunteer organizations to contribute towards a goal of 100% smart board in every classroom, that we need to commit as an organization to make sure that all of our teachers are equipped to utilize that technology for when that happens. Because otherwise, there's a huge disconnect, and similar to sort of the impression that some have with Edline. Edline has been touted as a way to engage families, to keep parents connected, and yet if we don't have teachers who are using that on an ongoing basis, we fail. And I don't think, certainly, I guess to your point, Ms. Gormley, the enhancement that a smart board environment brings to a classroom is where we need to be in every single classroom, if that's what we believe is the direction. And certainly, from a purchasing perspective, that's where we're heading. So I guess I would ask that this be updated, and maybe, I would gladly hear if we don't think we can accomplish that. But I think it needs to be a very concerted effort to get it 100% compliance in terms of utilizing that technology. And then the other question I had was, as we're going to individual non-portable devices, do we have a great inventory system, storage, security system, so that we don't end up, the lab over there isn't going anywhere? When we start talking about clickers and all these other technology, we need to make sure we have a great system for security, and is it something, that maybe we should think about as a capital investment? I'm not sure how it should work, but I think we should probably get whatever the best systems are that are out there that communities are using now, and see if we can replicate it here.
Can I just speak to that exact point? So a lot of the handheld devices, the iPads, have GPS systems in them that you can literally track them to a person's house if they're stolen. So just.
But that would require that you have some system that does the tracking, and whatever that is. Again, it's just, it's creating a system that allows you to utilize.
It's there.
Yeah, we have learned a lot, as Mr. Patterson mentioned, with our pilot at Tucker. And so we purchased a container that all the iPads go in and get charged overnight. And it actually serves as a wireless cart while we don't have wireless throughout every building. And it also serves as a security measure to make sure that they're all accounted for on a nightly basis and when they're distributed and collected, et cetera. And I think that every device will have its own type of mechanism that's a physical thing that we would, try to buy. But to Ms. Sheridan's point, and I believe Mr. Patterson could speak better to it, each of these devices can be tracked via GPS. So ironically, Mr. Patterson put one on my laptop so it wouldn't get stolen, and we were looking at myself one day on his laptop. He said, "This is a camera that's looking at you, just in case you were stealing your computer. I know where it is because this camera pops up." So there are other more technically savvy ways to keep track of things as well. All of those thoughts and concerns were brought to our attention in a very real way when we did the pilot. And I think that that's another example of why the committee wants to pilot different devices in a slow manner, so we can start to work out those kinks before we go out and buy 400 of anything or 200 of anything.
Mr. Walker had a question.
So I should open by saying I'm not ready to vote this evening, but our technology is so important to our overall success. It's central to the advancement priorities and initiatives that we've articulated, and it is absolutely essential to making sure that those students who are struggling in some cases can close the gap. But I want to go back to 2 points that both Ms. Kelly and Ms. Bagley-Jones made that have to do with compliance. I got an email from a parent about Edline, which said, I thought that teachers were supposed to be putting all the assignments online so I could track that with my kid and know what they were supposed to be doing. And I asked that question, and the answer was, well, we have a provision in the contract. But I think we're asking a different question, which is, how is it possible that if we are saying to parents, you will be able to access all your students' assignments online, that there could be any teachers who aren't complying with that? I don't understand that. Still looking for an answer to that question. Similarly, I think the question that Ms. Bagley-Jones asked was a yes or no question. I don't really think I need a presentation on smart boards, but her question was, so is it possible that we could put a new smart board in a classroom and it could not be used by the teacher all year? I hope the answer to that question is no, but I didn't really hear an answer to that question. What I heard was we do training and we'll do a presentation on smart boards, but is it possible that we could equip a classroom with a new smart board and it could not be used or would not be used by the teacher all year? And so again, that's the question, and how do we know? How do we monitor that?
I think we monitor that by the evaluations that every principal and administrator does of every single teacher throughout the district that has a criterion that specifically asks for the use of technology and a rating on the use of technology and a narrative to be provided to the teacher on their use of technology. So that is a direct answer to the question that every teacher is evaluated on his or her use of technology in the classroom that is viewed through their observation process and their evaluation process.
And if I could drill down just a bit. So we installed this smart board in July, August, so it's ready for the opening of school. When would be the first point at which there would be, I guess, an observation visit as part of the evaluation? How soon would we know that the teacher might not be taking advantage of this technology?
I'd step back one further step before I went into that question, which would be, especially in the beginning and middle stages of everybody who received a smart board, when they signed up for it, had to come in August for training. That was beyond their regular professional development days. So that was the incentive, that you had to be someone who wanted to use it and would commit your own time to being trained.
Good.
After that population of folks was saturated, and we gave everybody to ones that were hustling for it, and that population grew because when people saw the good work that was going on, we had funding to be able to move forward. As it came in through PTOs, the foundation, the Copelands, et cetera, there were professional development opportunities for everybody, and they were targeted professional development. So we would email the folks that got the new smart board, whether they liked it or not, and said, we want you to be in on this August day, or we want you to come to this workshop, this 2-hour or 5-hour workshop. So that's the proactive approach to making sure that everybody has what they need. We have Edline mentors in every building as well that help people with that kind of work. When would they be first observed? Probably in the last week of September, between the last week of September and the first week of October, with the first evaluation. We have all evaluations submitted to me personally before Thanksgiving of every year. Each administrator evaluates up to 17 or 18 folks. That's a pre-meeting, an observation, a post-meeting, a write-up, a review of the write-up. So those are 4 different interactions with the staff person for every first evaluation of a school year. So that's as many conversations that will be had on that subject or on all parts of teaching, and there'll be one observation involved in that.
Ms. Kelly wanted to chime in.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, certainly our obligation as a system is to provide them with the training. I think really what's being asked is, okay, you've been trained. If I only use it for the evaluation process, I'm not doing what the expectation is. The expectation is, and I'm not sure whether it's every day, whether it's every other day, some people are, but I think, depending on what level we're talking about, there's an expectation that it's being utilized. And to say that, by the end of whatever, that we will evaluate that, I would hope that principals walking in and out of classrooms all day long have a sense of whether there is someone who is just not utilizing their technology, and that would be identified and hopefully remedied before we even get to a formal evaluation.
There's no doubt. When I'm asked for a direct answer, I want to give you a concrete process by which the district takes on that challenge. Principals, administrators walk in and out of classrooms all the time, and that data can be used in an evaluation process or document. And quite frankly, the new evaluation tool encourages that type of walking through for 10 minutes and using that data as part of the new evaluation tool. So that's only going to enhance our ability to use that data as part of the evaluation. So yes, teachers have a very good, principals and administrators have a very good idea of who's very good at it, who needs more help at it, and who might need to be more encouraged or through the supervision and evaluation tool given a prescription about using more technology in the classroom. And everybody is at a different spot, and we have a lot of home run hitters who use it all the time. And the parents know who the teachers are, who use it well and don't use it well, because their children's experience may be, verbalized to them, or their access to, PowerPoint and different things that go on in their room for technology. So we have a staff that fits a range of skill level, and we as a district are organizing how we approach proactively providing professional development, monitoring the use, and trying to ensure that when we go out and ask folks for this stuff, that we're using this stuff well in a very effective way, and we're going to be getting better at it every year we do it, and we're going to be adding new technology as we go along.
Ms. Bagley-Jones.
I think, and I'll just speak for myself, and I think those are all great things, John, that you're talking about. I think because of my experience with the new iPhone and my humbling of myself in terms of having to beg for help, and been told, tough love, learn it on your own, things like that. But anyway, even the guy at the Apple Store kept handing it back to me, saying, no, you figured out. But anyway, so I'm humbled by that. So I mean, no disrespect to anyone, but I guess what I'm saying, I know that you're all working hard on this. I know you're doing a lot of things, but what I want to hear is that this is a priority, that folks are using it, that they know how to use it, that their knowledge surpasses the kids in front of them, which, you know, will be really hard given my own experience. That Edline is, we're talking about parent involvement. Middle school and high school, you're not going to see parents, but they are going to be checking Edline, especially when their kid's been out. We don't have 100% cooperation on Edline. We all know that. We just don't. So what is going to be taken? And you all have to do that. I mean, you're in charge of the school system, so we have to hold you accountable. If somebody's not using Edline, why not? If we're talking about parent engagement. If they're not using their smart boards, why not? If they're not taking their kids to a higher level in this technology-driven society, why not? Like, what's up with this? And then my last point is you can do all the training you want, myself an example of that, but, you know, you need to still have, you need somebody really behind you, like you're referencing, John, about being there and pushing you to do that, but I don't always get the sense that I don't get the sense it's always a priority. I don't know, I could be wrong. And then my last point was computer loans. I don't know if we ever have loans that have been out of service or, you know, are still okay but not great, because we talk about families who don't have laptops. Well, if we're going in this direction, especially with our math and science concerns, wouldn't it be nice to be able to recycle some of our less new computers? And I mean, I don't even know if that's realistic, but, or how you would do it and whatever, but every kid should have access to a computer at home. If there's a way that we could help with that with excess as you turn them in, right? I'm looking at Bob because.
Well, by the time we retire a computer, it's ready for the dumpster.
Yep.
Literally.
So could we?
Well,
I don't know. It's just a thought to think about.
there would be no way for us to support a student's computer at home. They have the computer. It's not going to do them much good without the internet access that they may or may not have. While I agree with you, I see a lot of hurdles with trying that.
But maybe that's something that, you know, we can look at with the Milton Foundation or the Copeland or other folks, because we're all talking about literacy and support at home. But I don't know, if parents aren't able to do internet or a computer, then how are we helping them?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that if you remember Principal Sheen from the Collicott, one of her priorities was to have computer lab time for students who didn't have access to study islands. So I think that all the principals explore ways to provide access to students in school. We have not explored the idea of recycling computers to families who may need a laptop, or we don't really have many laptops, but a desktop at home, and that would be something we could explore. I think to Bob's point, I think he grinds the water out of every computer that we have on behalf of the district. But if there were any worthwhile computers in the district that were not going to be used, I don't know if we've ever been at that stage to be at that luxury, but we would explore if we could redistribute them amongst
Or maybe
families.
put, you know, if there are grants out there in terms of a lending library of computers, so it's not the broken computers. I'm just saying it's a thought to put out there of maybe we could look into it. I'll stop talking.
Ms. Kelly.
Just on that point, you know, in ages where everyone's getting the notepad, I don't even know what they're called, and you have that old server that's sitting on your desktop, I'm saying maybe as a community, you know, if the DPW collected people who are upgrading in terms of their technology, maybe that's a way that we could try and fill some of those holes for families who, you know, would love to be able to get something that they could have that technology at their home on. So it's something to think about.
Mr. Darrow.
You know, in my experience is from what I've seen from teachers using the smart boards or other technology has been excellent. But in talking about it, I'm wondering, I mean, Superintendent Gormley and I had toured the Cunningham, as she had said, and one of the teachers was very, adept in technology. She had, in fact, I think had written for a donor choice to get the clickers.
To the MFE.
Yeah, MFE. And she was using the clickers, and I think, was that the second grade class?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm just wondering if some of our, and Mr. Redden also, some of our more equipped technology faculty have a way of sharing what they're doing in the classroom with others, because I think a lot of people would like to use it probably more, and maybe, they've had the basic training, but they need to make it a little more friendly with them. And when they see the potential for what they can do, maybe are there ways that we can have them collaborate? Is there time for them? Something like that?
And I believe that the teacher that you're referring to, Ms. Padera, said to us, I've trained all the teachers at my grade level on the clickers.
We need her.
Maybe she could come over to school committee member Kristen Bagley-Jones' house and help her with her iPhone.
Very fun.
All right. This plan needs to be submitted to the state on an annual basis. What is the date by which it needs to be there? Because I'm thinking in terms of Mr. Walker's comment a minute ago that he's not ready to vote this.
February 1st, so we have another meeting.
So is,
I just think this is substantial enough that it's worth our looking at it in some detail. Maybe all of you have read it, I haven't. And making sure that there's the integration that we're looking for. And we've already raised a few questions that I think need to be addressed, so.
We purposely put it on the agenda so if we had two meetings so that we thought that we probably would be getting feedback even though we wrote vote.
Good. We certainly take that approach with a one-page policy, so I would think with a technology report that's 20 pages, we'd do first reading, vote the next time.
all right, then I would invite folks to make their comments and get them back to, go to Mr. Phelan is a reasonable person, or Mr. Patterson, who would like it? All of our various comments.
Questions can come to me, and Bob and I can sit down and...
Okay, so if you have comments on this, send them
Then
to
just,
Mr. Patterson, Mr. Phelan.
things that might fall outside the scope of this, but certainly within the scope of this overall discussion, things to follow up on, or questions in my mind still outstanding. Headline compliance and how we get to 100% quickly. Compliance with, or use of smart boards in a manner that, as Ms. Bagley-Jones said, is creating the best educational environment. So proficiency on the use of smart boards and consistent use of smart boards and how we ensure that that occurs. And then I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss the idea of some sort of computer loan program that for students who don't have access to computers. I know Mr. Patterson said that we would have no way to support that, but most companies do that every day, so I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss the idea. So I'd like to think more about that, because I think Ms. Bagley-Jones is on to something. Thanks.
All right, so I invite people to get their comments back. We'll have one more meeting before this is due to be submitted to the state, so we'll try to amalgamate those
So
comments
comments,
into the
Mr.
document
Phelan?
so we can vote it at our next meeting. Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Gormley. Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had taken edits the last time from Ms. Bagley-Jones and Mr. Walker on my goals. I believe it might have been Member Kelly. I had said before the meeting that I am going to meet with Linda Lee Sheridan on working out for the policy, the reporting times on my goals. So I didn't follow up and delineate the goals over the 2 years, which I'm going to do for our next meeting. I had brought up, did you want to defer the vote or vote the goals, and then I'll bring them back at the next meeting, delineated over the next 2 years.
Since I recommended the most significant improvement or revision, I'm going to move that we approve these with the understanding that the superintendent will come back with a clearer outline for which goals and outcomes are occurring in year 1 and in year 2. But I don't think we need that in order to vote these. So I'm going to move approval.
Second.
So it's moved by Mr. Walker, seconded by Ms. Sheridan, approval of the superintendent's goals as distributed in this attachment.
Can I just ask a question?
Go right ahead.
And I know I made the suggestion, reduce by 5%. What are we talking about in numbers?
I'll bring the exact numbers to you.
No, just, what do you think around?
I'd rather give you the exact number.
Okay.
On the state's expectations
on
are.
the second page?
No, on the second page are the state's exact expectations. I'll bring you translated percentage-wise what the exact
The
numbers are.
reason I'm asking is that, is 5% realistic, is 50, is 10, I mean, I don't want it on your shoulders.
I gave a lot of reflection to your
Okay.
comment, and so I think it's the goal.
Okay, all right, if you, okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just one.
Go right ahead.
So on the revised, this is on page 3, maybe. Well, 3 from the top, 2 if you're going with the original memo. This is Area 3, Leadership Professional Practice Goals. So this was the revision, and I like this better. My only question is, how will we know, what are the measures here? How will that information get to us?
What I thought when we sat down with Ms. Sheridan, I would come up with every month or every other month a reporting packet to you.
Great. Good, thanks.
Any other discussion? Ms.
Just to
Sheridan.
clarify, so the reason that I'm sitting down with Ms. Gormley is because as a part of the policy, when we looked at the superintendent evaluation, because it's so new, we needed to come up with a reporting time. So I just wanted to clarify why it is that we're
happy that you're sitting down.
meeting. Okay.
So any further discussion?
And I think working collaboratively, individuals have said to me, these goals are, we are a system, and so the initiatives that are my goals are the goals that you're hearing through the site councils.
Good.
All right, seeing no further discussion, then we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the superintendent's goals with the provisos given previously? That is unanimous. Thank you very much.
And briefly, today was our first professional development day at Milton High School. Mr. Phelan and I met with Principal Jett, from surveying the teachers to reports from the department heads. We're going to report out to you and the public what happened during this professional development day and give you feedback after each session. Tomorrow afternoon, you heard referred to, we have our second district-wide Citizens for Diverse Milton meeting with the diversity groups from each of the schools, meeting here from 4 to 6 tomorrow afternoon. In your green folders, in my evaluation, excellent constructive idea was a tracking system, so it provided you in the green folder with a first attempt at a tracking system over the last 2 months of questions, the data, the answers to your questions, and when there will be follow-up. So if you took a look at that in your green folder and got back to me, one of the questions you had asked for was the next debate competition. Our Milton High School debate team will be competing this Saturday, January 12th, at Newton South. Again, on the website, Kindergarten Information Night is next week, January 17th at 7 o'clock here in the Milton High School auditorium. The STEM Parent Information Night, initiated question from Ms. Bagley-Jones, will be January 31st at the Cunningham Collycott Cafeteria. I'll make sure that you all get several invitations. That's district-wide. The response already by parents and guardians has been phenomenal. Grade 1 Information Night, February 12th. Dr. Spalding alluded, we invited, per Ms. Sheridan's request, the PS players, but they were otherwise engaged tonight. So when in Rome on January 17th, we'll make sure, 17th and 18th presentations. I'm going to ask Mr. Phelan for one moment to communicate to the public and to the school committee a very special event, an annual event that happens here in Milton that involves every aspect of the community, but the schools are well represented on the MLK night at now the Concord Baptist Church on Monday, January 21st. Mr. Phelan?
Sure. Each year we work with and partner with our community clergy and churches and community at this event. The teachers have been at each grade level in a different way working towards a prompt that the group gives the schools, not just the Milton Public Schools, but St. Mary's and St. Agatha's to take part. The schools provided documents and products to the Milton Times as of, I believe, yesterday or Monday afternoon at 5, and they'll be sending more products, poems, pictures, and artwork, et cetera, to the Concord Baptist Church for the event that night. So we look forward, as we always do, to providing music and participation and conversation with this group that we've been working with for a long time. It is an annual partnership that we take part in each year.
Briefly, we sent communication to the Glover community and the Milton Public School community that Stephanie Nephew, who was the principal at Glover, and the current principal, Drew Eckelson, are now in a job share, co-principal partnership at the Glover, and the response has been phenomenal, very supportive from teachers, students, and parents and guardians. We have publicized and that Mr. Gillis will be leaving us and going to the Hull Public Schools, our loss. Matt Gillis has made unbelievable contributions and been a member of our team. He'll be here through the beginning of February and our warrant committee presentation. We are actively have leads out and are working and going to sit down with the school committee on an interim, somebody in an interim position through June, and this weekend we're putting out all of our advertisements that we'll share with you at our next meeting to look to fill that position. We'll be looking for school committee representation, community representation on that screening committee, and I'll give you an update at the next meeting on that. Ms. Bagley-Jones, I had down to talk about the walkathon, but I think that you may want to refer to the walkathon. Would you like to?
Yes. Saturday,
One short month away.
Saturday, February 9th, everyone's expected to show up in their sneakers, ready to walk, pledge sheet in hand. School committee members have to set a good example by getting pledge sheets from their friends and neighbors. I'm kidding, you don't have to. But we are underway. We have less than a month to pull off this walkathon, and we will. We've met with the student leaders. Leaflets are going out. The high school students really take the ball and run with it, literally. And we really hope that it's another success. It's our 5th year of doing the walkathon. We explained to the kids that the school budget only pays for a third of our athletic and sports and clubs. Another third is gate receipts, and the other third is fundraising. So we're not raising the third fundraising from this walkathon. It's the banners and it's other things as well, but there's a fair amount of pressure to raise. We try to raise $30,000 every year. So we're never in a position again where we say, guess what, we're cutting spring sports as we thought about 5 years ago. So that's why this exists, to try to get that happening. Hopefully every single school will do caps for cats where they get to wear a hat and they pay $1 or $2. But it's high school students and grade 8 students. Parents can be there, but they're there as helpers. It's clearly a high school show. And the high school students approach businesses with the letter that we've written. And they are very responsible and respectful and have done a great job so far. So I think that it will be a good event. So Saturday, February 9th, 1 to 4, Copeland Fieldhouse. And we're going to have a lot of fun. And it's a good thing to do.
And the able, under the
forgot who
able
else.
leadership of Kristen Bagley-Jones, Renee Tabor, Maureen Griffin, and Laura Kessel, who are taskmasters, who get right in front of those Milton High School students. And Ms. Bagley-Jones said, try to raise the money. These are dollars that make the Milton High School athletic program run. We need these funds.
And we also, I forgot to mention, we need parents to help us. Laura Kessler's oldest has graduated. Katie Krause. So Katie's not even here anymore, and Laura felt bad for her, so she jumped back in and is helping us. So if there are any parents out there who would like to help, we're actually meeting this Sunday at 1 at Laura's house to go over where we're at with everything. So if anybody is bored on Sunday at 1 and would like to come help, we'd love to have you. Becca, were you gonna?
I just wanted to ask, because, I'm in a neighborhood without any high school kids, so they don't come on my door. But if you're a parent that wanted to, sponsor a child, can they go that day, or how would they go about? I mean, I almost think it'd be a great, as we send the high school kids down to the elementary schools for the play performances, maybe we could send a bunch down with a letter, anybody that'd like to sponsor me, and, the kids could bring home the letter and say, can we sponsor this student, or some way of getting some of the other parents involved.
Right. We haven't sent letters home to the elementary students, but we certainly could talk about that. That would be a great idea. The high school students do go down to grade 8 to get them involved with the walk, but we haven't gone to the elementary schools other than the Caps for Cats. So,
She's thinking about it.
Hmm?
She's thinking about it now.
I know. We might be good.
Sure.
And what we try to do is to say, if you want to donate, it is a tax-deductible donation. It's made out to Milton Student Activities, is that right?
You can just make it out to Milton High School.
But it is a tax deduction for people.
That's up to their tax, we're a government entity and a nonprofit.
Yes, it is a tax
So
deduction.
we don't give tax advice.
Thank you, thank you.
So take that from your accountant.
That's right.
not from us.
People have used it as a tax deduction in the past, that's all.
Kristen, you should probably just give your email address so that people can contact you directly if they're interested in helping.
BagleyJones@Comcast.net. BAGLEY Jones@Comcast.net, all one word.
And we'll turn the front of the website tomorrow into the walkathon.
1 month.
Next, I'd like to ask Member Padera to share an update from the MFE, our representative on the MFE now, about the upcoming celebration.
Very exciting. So March 9th is the Celebration for Education this year, and as I think Mr. Phelan had mentioned, they're going to be raising money in the next 2 years to provide innovative technology to all 6 schools. The celebration is going to be held at the Quincy Marriott again, but it'll be looking completely different with neon and lights, interactive displays, and demonstrations of technology. So high-tech surprises are promised. People will get their invitations the first week in February, so very soon, and then tickets will also be able to be purchased online, and the site, very easy to get to, miltonfoundationforeducation.org. Right now, the event committees are currently working on soliciting sponsorship and silent and live auction items, so if you are interested, you can reach the leaders, which came here the other night, Ann Gatnick and Anna Christina, at CFE, Celebration for Education, CFE 2013 at Comcast.net. And also, there are still some of those, just a few of those Jeep raffle tickets left. So if you're interested in finding out how to purchase one, I think there's still some events left that we'll be selling them at. And again, Milton Foundation for Education.org, they'll list the events for you and those opportunities.
And in closing, one more bit of exciting news. Mr. Walker, Mr. Pavlicek, our leadership team, and Ada Rosemarin had a meeting with Milton Public School parent and Board of Education member, Dr. Vanessa Calderon Rosado, about the need for the Milton Public Schools to secure that full-day kindergarten grant and the importance of our full-day kindergarten program to our students and their families. And Dr. Calderon Rosado suggested that we contact the commissioner, which you sent a letter lobbying through your chair, Chairman Pavlicek, and we contacted the commissioner. So the good news is on April 1st, the commissioner of Education, Chester, Dr. Vanessa Calderon Rosado will be visiting their choice, the Glover and Milton High School. And so circle that April 1st date. We got detailed instructions today when to invite the press, and there'll be 2 focus groups that parents will be, and community members will be able to be with the commissioner alone, without the press, in a room about, again, we've invited the commissioner on to see our full-day kindergarten program and to hear from our teachers and parents about the benefits of the program, and to have the commissioner choose to visit the Glover and Milton High School is very, very exciting. So that's April 1st. We'll give you more details about that visit before then. Thank you.
All right. A couple things very briefly under my report. One is you were given an item on the Charms Collaborative every year. We are required to appoint a member, either a member of the school committee or as a designee member of the administration, to serve as our representative on the board of directors of the collaborative, which in this case is the Charms Collaborative. Over the last many years, it's been Superintendent Gormley who has served as our representative on that board, and I would entertain a motion to
Move that we reappoint Superintendent Gormley as our representative to the Charms Collaborative.
Second.
seconded by Ms. Bagley Jones. Any discussion on that? Yes, Ms.
Are
Bagley.
we still, is Charms still up and running? Are we
Yes.
still?
Yes.
Is it going
Yes.
to survive? I mean, is it?
I'll give you an update on the status of Charms, but we have 4 students enrolled.
Okay.
The number of students is holding. I attend monthly meetings. Karen Clasby attends monthly meetings of SPED directors, and I'll give you an update on
Thank you.
status.
2 other items, very, oh, yes. All those in favor?
That's important.
Yes, so that's unanimous. On here is mentioned school safety. I just wanted to mention this in light of recent events. We've gotten a lot of communication from parents and others asking, well, how does the Milton Public Schools do X, Y, and Z, especially in light of the Newtown incidents and so forth? The short answer is certainly, and probably to no one's surprise, we don't discuss the technical details of safety measures in public session. But I just wanted to reassure people that the superintendent meets amazingly frequently with the chief of police and with Sergeant Richmond from the force, who is our liaison on security matters. It is something that is constantly looked at, not just in the last month, but it is an ongoing basis. It is a concern and always has been a concern, but we do, when people say, well, what do you do if, I have to just say politely, we're not going to tell you what we do if, because those sorts of things you don't say publicly. But it is a concern. We do take it very seriously, but I apologize for not getting back to people's explicit questions about, well, if this happened, what would the procedure be? Because it is a matter of public safety, especially with the children. So it's not that we're not responding, it's that we don't respond on such matters. Mr. Walker.
Just one more point on that. It has come to my attention that when we do the drills that are necessary to make sure that everyone understands the protocols, and these are actually protocols that we're advised could save lives, there may not be complete compliance, or said differently, there may be a small number of teachers that are not taking these drills seriously enough. So I've had this conversation with the superintendent, and I'm confident that she understands that these are serious drills and they should be taken as such. But I will make it my personal mission to make sure that there are consequences if we have teachers that aren't taking these drills seriously, because they could possibly save lives, and there's nothing that's more serious than that.
One other item that I just wanted to mention that isn't on the agenda, but is part of my report. I represent the school committee on the town's master planning committee, and I just wanted to give you a quick update. The Master Plan Committee is undergoing a first of a couple of public forums on visioning for the town. It's going to be held on the first one is going to be held on the last Saturday of this month. I believe that's the 26th, whatever the last Saturday is, from 9 to noon in the morning. It's going to be held at the Tucker School. We're going to hold them in a couple different locations around town. This one's going to be at Tucker. It's an initial meeting. All the public's invited. There's been some announcement of it in the Ledger had picked it up in the Globe. There's going to be a follow-up article. The idea, when people talk about master planning, they tend to think about, well, you know, how are we going to zone this and zone that? And this is very much in advance of that. This is the sort of question, we invited people to come to answer the sorts of questions like, what is it that you don't do in Milton, you have to leave town to do, that you'd really like to do here? And what does your day look like, and what would you like it to look like? And how do you see this town now and in the future? And it's those sorts of 30,000-foot view of the town that we're starting with, because that's how you start planning. You don't talk about, you talk about someone saying, I'd like to be able to walk and pick up a quart of milk, as opposed to saying, where would you like a convenience store? It's a vision of life in the town. And there's going to be a couple of these to start out with before you get into the full planning. There's going to be more information out on them. I'm just pointing it out now. It's 3 weeks ahead, and this will be the first one. And inviting people to come, because the more people who come and talk about this, the more reliable view we'll have for this committee of where this master planning is going. So that's a quick update.
I think a few years ago, we might have wanted a restaurant to go and eat in, and now we have a few, so it's wonderful.
So that's upcoming. That's all I have. Is going to recognize Ms. Begley-Jones on the walkathon, but Ms. Corley beat me to it, so.
Got that again.
No, that's all right. On to the policy subcommittee, Ms. Sheridan.
Thank you, Mr. Pavlicek. So at our last meeting, we had the second reading of the grade 1 assignment, but there were some edits in it and some questions, and thank you to Mrs. Kelly for sending us some of her recommendations. And school committee members got an updated version mailed to us for the public to know some of the tweaks. It was really nothing substantial in content. It was really just giving a little bit more detail. One of the challenges with a policy such as this is we don't want to make it so finite that it becomes a procedural document. And we need to have some form of, or some leverage to be able to say it's not going to happen on a date certain. The grade 1 and student assignment is not going to happen on a date certain, but before a certain date. So that's really how we tried to frame it. And the document that you have in front of us that's a little bit different gives a little bit more specifics about the lottery itself. So if everyone will indulge me, I'll just read that bottom part where it says lottery details, just so the viewing public have a sense of the changes. The lotteries will typically take place in the spring. The lotteries will be conducted by the superintendent and/or her designee. Results of the lotteries, including assignment and waitlist order, will be communicated on an individual basis. The available seats will be determined using a computer-generated random number process. Multiples, twins, triplets, etc., will enter the lottery as a single entry. Waitlists for all open seats for all lotteries will remain in effect until the first day of school. Once school starts, this isn't in the policy, but I'm just explaining. Once school starts, everything is wiped clean, as no one would enter a French immersion program after once school is started. The lottery ordered, the order of it. School-based lottery for kindergarten students attending the Milton Public Schools as of March 1st will receive the first lottery. If seats still exist at one or more schools, then district-wide lottery for kindergarten students attending the Milton Public Schools as of March 1st that have been waitlisted at their home school and would voluntarily leave their home school. And then if seats still exist at one or more schools, there will be a school-based lottery for kindergarten students who begin attending the Milton Public Schools sometime between March 1st and the end of the school year. And then if there are still seats available, then school-based lottery for students new to the Milton Public Schools in grade 1. So I didn't preface this by saying, in the event that the demand, the sentence that precedes all this, in the event that the demand for French immersion exceeds the number of available seats, the superintendent will assign students based on the results of these lotteries. So hopefully that this has clarified some of the questions that people had. Some of the things have been moved around a little bit, Mrs. Kelly, even from your edits that you suggested. And I'm open for discussion or comments or interested in your feedback.
Ms. Kelly?
So under lottery detail, where we say the lotteries will typically take place in the spring, can we get a little bit more definitive?
Well, it does below that. So it says lottery order, then it goes to March 1st. Oh, no,
That's
I'm sorry.
identifying who's in the pool.
Right.
We don't, and to your point, I wouldn't want to say it's always on the second Tuesday of March or whatever, but can we establish by when a lottery would take place? Because, and the reason I'm asking is, we serve the entire community. There are some people that may make a decision between a private placement and French immersion. Believe it or not, that might be happening. So being able to identify for them at least a timing issue might give them a better sense of sort of what we're prescribing here. I'm just throwing it out there as something to think about.
Sure. So for the purposes to answer that question, if I were to be in that situation, I would know that as of March 1st, I would want to be enrolled in the Milton Public Schools to be considered for the first round of the lottery. So to answer that question, that date is in there. More specifically, when will the lottery take place? Most likely it will take place in the first 2 weeks of March, given the fact that we want to take stock of who is actually a Milton Public School student by March 1, use that as the enrollment that we go by in terms of the lottery of existing kindergarten students as of that date. I wasn't in the policy committee meeting where that subject may have been discussed, but to answer your first question, if I went online and I looked at this policy and I was a kindergarten parent deciding what you were saying was their quandary, I would say I would have to enroll my child before March 1st if I was looking to be in the first year of the lottery.
Right, so that's enrolling, right?
Yep.
Then I can still roll my, say I already enrolled, I still have that divide. I may want to go on to French immersion, but I may want to go on to private school, right? So when can I have some certainty? Can we just?
You know what, you're absolutely right, Ms. Kelly. The first round of this said the lottery would be in March. So I think in the edits, it changed. So I would suggest that it says in March.
Take place in March or in the
Yes,
first few weeks?
because I would say in March. If you have to enroll by March 1st, then I'm going to have the lottery in the next 2 weeks. So we had said that the lottery would take place in March.
Again, just to establish some timeline.
It was in the first
So
round.
just before you go any further, Mrs. Kelly, if I can just speak to that. So one of the things that we talked about was having, this is the policy, and then there will be a procedural piece that the administration will develop, and that's where all of this
Right, and so
information.
typically our parents and families out there don't have access to whatever our procedures are internally.
But that's,
If you want to propose it, this is a big change,
I
right?
understand, I'm
And
not
we
disputing
need to
that.
sort of be able to manage everyone out there. So the cleaner, not that we have to go down to specifics, but the cleaner that we can be with this, I think the better off we're going to be. That's my only, so if it just has, when you say typically in spring, that could mean April, that could be May, for crying out loud. If we're saying that lotteries will be held in March, I think that gives some certainty to this process. And then I think people will have an understanding of what's going on. Additionally, in the next sentence, results of the lotteries, including the assignment and wait list, the next sentence is the available seats. It really isn't the available seats, it's the seat assignments, I think, will be determined using a computer-generated random number process. Because available seats are what we're trying to fill, and the process is identifying who's going to fill them. Does that make sense?
So I think, yeah, maybe it isn't available seats. It's, what did you say it was?
Assignment,
seat
assignment to the available seats, possibly.
Assignment to available. Sure.
Mr. Walker, you had
Yes, let's go back to the wording that said the spring was purposeful, as you might have guessed. So if we're going to specify a time, then I'd like to specify a time period. So after March 1st, but not later than April 30th. But I want to give us enough time that if for some reason the date slips, that we're not in the position of someone saying, well, you're out of compliance with your policy because you said March and it actually occurred on April 2nd, therefore all the results should be voided and we should start all over. I'd rather say, let's specify a period of time during which it will occur. March is a little too narrow, but I'd be comfortable with after March 1st, not later than April 15th, April 30th, whatever the leadership team thinks works there.
I guess maybe I'm not understanding the complexity of this and what the computer-generated process is. But it seems to me if after March 1st, it's going to take us 6 weeks to get this process done, we're setting up a system that maybe is too complex. I don't know. I don't know what this, is this computer-generated thing something that's fairly easy?
That takes 30 seconds.
2 seconds,
Right,
yeah.
okay. So I guess I would be much more comfortable. And again, I'm trying to gear ourselves to responding to all of our constituents, not just one, people who may be making those decisions. And I think March is typically a time frame around which I might still have the ability to get into a private placement. So I would be much more comfortable by saying March 3rd, whatever the last day of March is, if that's the time frame, I would be in agreement. But if we're going into April, I just think we're pushing it off too far.
So in March would suffice then?
I'd say after March 1st, not later than April 15th.
And you can say will typically
Yeah.
take place between
Yeah.
March 1st and April 15th. I do like March, just because I think it holds us to that, but I can live with April 15th.
Ms. Gormley?
Fine.
Fine to say March
Yes.
1st to April 15th?
Yes.
All right. Anything else from the policy? Yes, Ms.
And
Keller.
just the number 2, the leave instead of leaving their home school, right?
I read it that way, yes, I caught it when I read it.
Anything else? So this being a second reading, this would be
Move
up for
approval of the
a vote.
grade 1 assignment policy as revised.
Second.
Second by Ms. Bagley Jones. So it's been moved and seconded, this policy with the revisions that we've just gone over. Anything further? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
Facilities
I
Committee.
just have one really quick. Back in the fall, we voted, or actually, I think it was November, we voted a new policy based on a change in the Mass General laws, and it had to do with no idling outside of our school buildings. And maybe you've noticed that there are now signs up. They actually went up in December, but we didn't have a meeting then. So you'll see outside of the school front doors, it says this is a no idling zone. And I'm bringing this to people's attention because, A, it's a new sign, but B, we'd also like you to really adhere to that. So if you're parked outside the school, it's our hope and desire that you will turn your car motor off. I know that may be especially challenging in the cold weather, but it's for health and safety reasons, and it's now a policy of the Milton Public Schools. So we appreciate your help with this. Thanks. And thanks to Bill Ritchie for getting those signs and getting them up.
So now we'll move on to the Finance Subcommittee report.
And I will defer to Mr. Walker, because I was not able to attend the meeting on Monday, or it may even be the administration, because I'm not up to speed on either of the topics that were being presented. So.
Sure. So we considered a number of different proposals for fee increases, which we'll be recommending at a later date, but we were comfortable with the proposed increase in the full-day kindergarten tuition. So I'm going to recommend that we approve that increase. Yes, if I can see where it is here.
Oh, second page, bottom. Where is it? Maybe first page, Matt, the suggested,
I got a lot of numbers here, Matt. Where is it?
All down the bottom.
at the bottom. And I should know this, but what was it before?
3,700, and it was
35.50.
35.50. So it's a $150 increase
Okay,
from 35.50 to 3,700.
okay.
That's what the recommended fee increase is for full-day kindergarten.
Very confused. Are there different proposals here? Because on
One is
the
without
bottom
the,
of one says 4350, on
40
the other says 3700.
43.50 would be if the grant did not, if the grant money were to disappear, but we're not taking that up at the moment. That was a scenario if there was no full-day kindergarten grant. We're still
Right.
counting on there being.
Which
that.
we still don't know.
We don't.
And I thought we were sort of stepping, what was the last increase? Where were we 2 years
It's
ago?
$100, I think was the
Last
last.
year was 150, the year before was $100.
Okay,
Okay. So 100, 150,
and now 150.
now another 150 we're proposing. Because I thought the process was we were just gradually increasing it to hopefully get to that point where if the grant didn't, there would be prepared. It wouldn't be a huge jump.
So the motion on the floor, which I haven't heard a second on,
Second.
second by Ms. Sheridan, is to increase the fee for full-day kindergarten next year
$3,700.
to $3,700. Ms. Kelly?
Just because I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but we got some upgrade in enrollment projections. Is that factored in here? Is that, I'm not even sure what the change was, but if we could just get some clarification on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Gillis.
Yes, in the middle of the page, there is an enrollment projection. There's both a low enrollment projection and a high enrollment projection. So that is reflected in there. You know, at the top of the page, we list all the expenses, then we list the allocation that we can rightfully charge tuition for. We subtract the grant, and you get a total of $874,000. Our enrollment projections estimate $823,000 to about just under $860,000. So we're not supposed to be collecting more than half of what it is that we could charge back to the program. So this is the same model and method we've used the last 3 years, and sort of the same format to explain the program. The $3,700 fee, based on our history of where folks have fallen on the state's tuition assistance scale, gets us pretty close to where we want to be. We don't want to budget right at 50%, because if we have more kids come in than anticipated, we don't necessarily add teachers or expenses, and we don't want to be over and having to figure out how we refund people money towards the end of the year, or reduce those final tuition bills. So this is why the $3,700 is recommended.
But back to Mrs. Kelly's question on the NASDAQ. The original NASDAQ report had us at about 298, which was the low, which is our low-end projection here. The revised report brought it up to 310, I believe.
Yeah, the original was
Which is-
283, and they revised it to 310.
Yeah, so their
Still within the
current
range of
revision
what we
is
want.
close to our high-end provision, our high-end projection, and their original one was below our low end.
Right, so I guess that's why I'm asking the question. So as we're looking at these numbers, should we be adjusting what our high and low is based on a new enrollment projection from NASDAQ?
Well, my projection was 313. NASDAQ's original was 283. NASDAQ revised it to 310. Now, the reason I have a low there that's 15 below the 313 is because the recent history is that people are moving to town to get their kids into kindergarten, more so than the 272 that were born in town 5 years ago. This has been consistently happening. It could happen slightly less than what it's been happening, and it could happen slightly more, but the housing market hasn't seemed to have cooled the way it has in some other areas. The home values are relatively stable, and the realtors that I talk to in passing say that, you know, things are fairly busy, and I know folks that have been looking for homes in town, some that were employed here with the school department, took them a little while before they could find one they wanted. All those things you factor in with recent history, and I think that's why NESDEC decided when you take a straight line cohort survival method going back 5 years, that their projection was too far off, and they decided to change it.
Right, and I'm not questioning how or why they changed it. What I want to know is the knowledge that they're presenting, that perhaps you already had in your enrollment projection, is that accounted for from a high and low perspective in the way we're looking at potential costs for next year's full-day kindergarten?
The answer is yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Anything else on this? We have a motion on the floor. Yes, we do. We have a motion on the floor. I'm just looking for any other questions. Not seeing any. We'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor? That is unanimous. It's 5 at the moment. Ms. Bagley-Jones is away from the
Can
table.
I just ask a question on this?
Yes.
So we're at 3,700 now for full-day kindergarten, which still is on the very low end in terms of full-day kindergarten programs out there in the community. Is that correct?
I will say my,
Probably closer to the middle, but there are a lot of folks that get the kindergarten grant, about 2/3 of the state that have a full-day kindergarten program seem to get the grant. Also, I could tell you, Medfield, when we did the survey the last time, this time last year, Medfield, when the guy had asked me, you know, did we win, they had the highest at 4850. So we're still,
but with
Yeah.
respect to
With
private,
respect to other, that's
Oh,
really what I was
private's
trying to
real.
refer to.
Oh.
So parents who are out there trying to make decisions,
w-
you know, what should I be doing?
In that case-
$3,700 is still a very
Yes.
reasonable deal in the surrounding area.
I would say,
with respect to,
I paid more than, I paid $6,000 for my son, who is now 22,
Yeah.
for full-day kindergarten. So it was a little while ago. So, yeah, I think 37 is still a reasonable deal.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the, that piece, and the off-site solar. That was added at the last bit. This is something we've been discussing for a while,
At some length.
at some length, and,
And as you might recall, this is something that we projected in last year's budget as savings and this year's budget as savings. So we're pleased that finally it looks like we're at least going to be able to execute a contract with a vendor who can actually create this off-site solar farm that we've been counting on for quite some time now. So we've discussed this several times. I asked Matt to give us a handout of just a few key pages from the contract, but unless you'd like to look at the contract language, I'm going to move that we approve authorizing the chair to execute a contract with the vendor that will be our off-site, electrical vendor that will be our off-site solar farm vendor. We just, and the reason that we brought this forward is we just received today the final opinion from council that he is comfortable with the contract as it reads. So it is ready for execution.
I'll
And-
second that. But can we name the vendor? Sorry. Is
the
it
vendor
Broadway?
is Wildcat Solar
Wildcat
LLC.
Solar.
Okay.
This is Wildcat Solar LLC. And the issue here is, since we got approval from the town council this evening, the sooner we execute this, the sooner it can be
Right.
brought online and created, and we can start saving money. Ms. Keller?
So speaking of that, there's a great chart at the end, but it has 30 days, 30 days, 40 days, 20 days, and a whole list. What are we talking about in terms of the, let's say, the earliest time, or I guess it's the earliest time that we might see this actually working for Milton Public Schools?
Earliest timeframe, a little over 9 months. More reasonable, could be 14 or 15 months.
So I think, it seemed to me anyways, what was being described within this was outside. So if you add up all the days, we're saying the outside it possibly is 14 months?
Right, and then depending on the weather, the construction period could push that out a little longer. It'd be a ground-mounted system of about approximately 14,000 solar panels in Natick that would be dedicated to the school department. The hitches here are mostly right after we get this signed and they have the lease signed and control of the site, is getting NSTAR's approval at several different steps in the process. And that could happen in short order, or they could drag it out to whatever the regulations say, and if they're late, there really isn't anything you can do except complain. And so it depends on how busy NSTAR is. So, once NSTAR is done, they think it's going to take them 90 days to construct. So,
Ms.
So,
Kelly?
given that, I guess I would ask if we can get at some point, not today, but there is some component of this that gives us money up front for, I think, the first year, is that
that's
correct?
correct.
So if this goes longer than a year and we're sort of outside of our typical fiscal track, what's the impact? What should we be concerned about in terms of going forward and not getting the cost savings that we're thinking we're getting here? So, and I don't need an answer right now. If we can maybe get a chart at a later date, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded to authorize the chair to sign the agreement with Wildcat LLC. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you.
Can I just say thank you to Mr. Gillis, because he has worked unbelievable hours on this from the first get-go to, the second round of it, and it's a huge savings to the school and to the town, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else from Finance Subcommittee? Citizen speak topic response. Next meeting agenda items, we put a couple things to our next meeting, a technology plan, and the Milton High Program of Studies, both pushed to the next meeting.
And executive session deployment of
And executive
security
session.
devices and personnel.
Okay, citizen speak. Not seeing anyone for a second citizen speak. I would entertain a motion to move into executive session for three purposes: negotiation strategy with non-union personnel, the administrative contracts, negotiation strategy for collective bargaining, which would have a detrimental effect if it were conducted in open session, and deployment of security personnel or devices and strategies.
So
With
moved.
respect thereto, not to return to open session, but to adjourn directly from executive session. Moved by Mr. Walker,
Second.
second by Ms. Sheridan. Roll call vote. Ms. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Bagley Jones?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Ms. Sheridan?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Badera?
Yes.
Thank you.